no. Oh, God, no. After all these years. Huh?
Oh, I didn't hear you come in. What are you doing here?
I think it's important for her to have the master bedroom.
I believe I need it more than she does.
I don't understand.
God.
Why would he do this?
When I came home after 3 days away, my suitcase was not the first thing I noticed. It was my clothes folded into boxes and stacked outside my own bedroom door. Inside, my husband's sister was hanging her dresses in my closet. Walter barely looked ashamed. "Cynthia needs the room more than you do right now," he said, as if 40 years of marriage gave him the right to decide where I slept. I didn't argue. I walked downstairs to my desk, searching for somewhere to put my jewelry. That was when I saw the cream-colored envelope hidden behind our tax files. Across the front in Walter's handwriting were 6 words. "Do not let Rosalie see this. If you were me, would you have opened it? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories about family betrayal and finding your strength speak to you, please like this video and subscribe." I have a feeling you're going to want to hear what was inside that envelope. 3 weeks before I found that envelope, I still believed Cynthia Bennett was coming to stay with us because she needed somewhere safe to land. If I had known what those 3 weeks would cost me, I might have answered the phone differently. It was a Tuesday evening in early October. Walter and I had just finished dinner, and I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing 2 plates when his cell phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression changed immediately. "It's Cynthia." There was nothing unusual about his sister calling, but there was something unusual about the way Walter stood up and carried the phone into the living room before answering. I could hear only pieces of the conversation. "What happened?" A pause. "Where are you now?" Another pause. "No, don't go back there if you don't feel comfortable." I turned off the faucet. Walter's voice softened. "Of course you can." That was the sentence that made me walk into the living room. I was standing beside the window with one hand pressed against his forehead. When he ended the call, I asked, "What's wrong?" Walter stared at the dark screen of his phone for a moment. "Cynthia left Frank." I knew their marriage had been strained. Cynthia had complained about Frank for years, his temper, his obsession with his small contracting business, the arguments about money. But she had also defended him whenever anyone suggested their problems were serious. "Left him?" I asked. "As in tonight," Walter nodded. "She packed a few things and walked out. She's sitting in her car outside some motel near Fredericksburg." "Oh, Lord." I sat down. "Is she all right?" "She says she is." "And Frank?" "She doesn't want to talk about him." That worried me, although Walter quickly assured me Frank had not physically hurt her. According to Cynthia, the marriage had simply reached a point where she could no longer stay. Then Walter said, "She needs somewhere to go." I already knew what was coming. We had a guest bedroom upstairs. It wasn't large, but it was comfortable. There was a queen-size bed, a dresser, a small reading chair, and a bathroom across the hall. "How long?" I asked. Walter shrugged. "A couple of weeks, maybe 3. I remember smiling. "Then tell her to come here." Walter looked relieved. "You're sure?" "Of course I'm sure. She's your sister." Those words would come back to me later. "She's your sister." As though that simple fact automatically answered every question that would follow. Cynthia arrived shortly after 10 that night. She stepped out of her car looking smaller than I remembered. At 59, she was still a striking woman, but that evening her shoulders were hunched beneath a beige cardigan and her eyes were swollen from crying. She had 3 suitcases. Walter rushed outside before I could reach the front door. He wrapped his arms around her. Cynthia buried her face against his shoulder. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. "You came to the right place," Walter said. "I heard it clearly. Not you can stay for a while. Not we'll help you figure this out. You came to the right place." At the time I thought it was kindness. I carried one of Cynthia's bags upstairs myself. I had changed the sheets before she arrived and put fresh towels on the bed. There was a small vase of yellow chrysanthemums on the dresser, because I have always believed that when someone enters your home carrying pain, the least you can do is give them something beautiful to look at. Cynthia noticed them immediately. You did this for me. It's nothing. She hugged me. No, Rosalie. It isn't nothing. For the first 2 days, I believed her gratitude was genuine. She cried often, sometimes over breakfast, sometimes while sitting on our back porch, sometimes without warning in the middle of a conversation. She told us Frank had become impossible to live with. The business is falling apart, she said one morning. Every conversation is about bills or loans or somebody calling him. Walter reached across the kitchen table and squeezed her hand. You don't have to worry about any of that here. Cynthia looked at him. Then she looked at me. I just need a few weeks to get myself together. Take the time you need, I said. That was my first mistake. Not because helping her was wrong, but because I offered kindness without defining where kindness ended. By the 4th day, Cynthia began mentioning the mattress. I barely slept, she said over coffee. Too soft, I asked. Too hard. My lower back is killing me. I offered to buy a mattress topper. She sighed. That might help. So I bought one. 2 days later, it was the bathroom. The shower upstairs takes forever to get hot. It's an older house, I said. Let it run for 30 seconds. I know. It's just difficult when you're already exhausted. Then the room itself became the problem. It gets so stuffy at night. I brought her a fan. The fan was too noisy. I found a quieter one. Then morning light came through the curtains too early. I offered blackout curtains. Cynthia smiled faintly. You don't have to keep fixing everything, Rosalie. That sentence almost made me laugh. I wanted to say, then stop finding things that need fixing. But I didn't. I reminded myself that this woman's marriage was ending. I told myself grief makes people difficult. Walter was less patient with me than I was with Cynthia. One evening after she had gone upstairs, I said, She seems uncomfortable no matter what I change. Walter frowned. She's going through a divorce. I know that. Then give her some grace. I am giving her grace. It doesn't sound like it. That stung. I had opened my home, changed my routine, cooked Cynthia's favorite meals, driven her to an appointment with a divorce attorney, and rearranged my mornings because she liked the kitchen quiet while she drank coffee. Yet somehow the moment I expressed frustration, I became the unreasonable one. I let it go. Walter had always been protective of Cynthia. Their father left when Walter was 17 and Cynthia was 11. Their mother worked 2 jobs and Walter became the closest thing Cynthia had to a second parent. He drove her to school. He scared away boys he didn't trust. He helped pay for her first semester at community college. Even after we married, Cynthia called Walter whenever something went wrong. A broken car, a medical bill, a fight with Frank. Walter fixed things. That was simply who he was. Or so I had always believed. About a week after Cynthia arrived, I walked into the kitchen and found her and Walter speaking quietly at the table. There were papers between them. The moment I entered, Walter folded them. Morning, I said. Cynthia smiled too quickly. Morning. What are you two working on? Nothing, Walter said. I looked at the folded papers. That looks like something. Just Cynthia's divorce mess. Cynthia lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. I hate bringing all this into your house. The apology made me feel guilty for asking. So I poured myself coffee and changed the subject. It happened again 3 nights later. I came downstairs because I had forgotten my reading glasses. Walter and Cynthia were in the living room. I heard Cynthia say, I can't wait forever. Then Walter noticed me. They stopped talking. Can't wait forever for what I asked. Cynthia gave a nervous laugh. My attorney. He takes forever to return calls. I looked at Walter. He nodded. Too quickly. Something tightened in my stomach. Still I said nothing. The phrase Cynthia had begun using bothered me more. The family house. The first time she said it while talking to Natalie on the phone. It feels strange being back in the family house. I nearly corrected her. Cynthia had never lived there. Walter and I bought that house nearly 28 years earlier, long after he and Cynthia had left their childhood home. The kitchen cabinets had been chosen by me. The oak tree in the backyard had been planted by Walter and me on our 20th anniversary. Our daughter had graduated from high school while living there. My mother had spent her final Thanksgiving at that dining table. It was not the McBride family house, it was our home. But correcting Cynthia seemed petty. Then she said it again, and again. One afternoon she stood in the foyer studying the staircase. You and Walter have done such beautiful things with the family house. I looked directly at her. You mean our house? Cynthia blinked. Then she smiled. Of course, that's what I meant. Walter was standing behind her. He gave me a look. Not anger exactly, a warning. Later he followed me into the laundry room. Did you really need to correct her? I corrected a sentence. She's vulnerable. And I'm not attacking her. You're making her feel like a guest. I stared at him. She is a guest. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds. But something changed inside it. Walter's expression hardened. She's family, Rosalie. I never said she wasn't. Then act like it. He walked away before I could answer. I stood beside the washing machine holding one of his shirts in my hands. For 41 years, Walter and I had disagreed about plenty of things. Money, parenting, retirement, his habit of leaving cabinet doors open, my habit of saving containers he insisted we would never use. But I could not remember another time when he had spoken to me as though my place in our home was somehow less important than someone else's comfort. That night, I woke around 2 in the morning. Walter's side of the bed was empty. I heard voices downstairs, quiet enough that I could not make out the words. I walked toward the staircase. Then I stopped. Walter and Cynthia were speaking in the kitchen. I could have gone down. I could have asked what was happening. Instead, I returned to bed. I told myself I was becoming suspicious for no reason. I told myself Cynthia was frightened. I told myself Walter was being a good brother. Most of all, I told myself that after 41 years of marriage, if my husband were making a decision that affected me, he would tell me. I believed that because I needed to believe it. But lying alone in our bedroom that night, listening to his muffled voice downstairs, I had no idea that Cynthia wasn't simply asking Walter for somewhere to stay. She was asking him for something much bigger. And Walter had already begun deciding how much of my life he was willing to give her, without ever asking me. By the end of Cynthia's second week in our house, I stopped believing she had packed only enough for a temporary stay. 3 suitcases had become 12 boxes. I knew the exact number because I counted them from the kitchen window as a delivery driver unloaded them beside our garage. Walter, I called. He was in the den watching television. What did Cynthia order? Something? He came into the kitchen, glanced outside and shrugged. Looks like some of her things. Some. The driver was pulling another large cardboard box from the truck. Walter opened the refrigerator. She probably doesn't want to leave everything at Frank's. I understand that. But why is she bringing it here? Walter gave me a look that suggested the answer should have been obvious. Because she's staying here, for a few weeks. He closed the refrigerator. Rosalie, do we really need to put an expiration date on everything? That sentence bothered me. Not because I wanted Cynthia thrown out. Because Walter had changed the agreement without admitting he had changed it. When Cynthia arrived that afternoon, I asked gently about the boxes. She sighed. Frank started threatening to put my things in storage. I didn't trust him. So you moved everything here, not everything. She smiled as though that should reassure me. These are mostly clothes photographs, some kitchen things. Kitchen things, my good dishes, a few appliances. I looked around our kitchen. We already had enough dishes to serve 20 people, but I said nothing. Walter helped Cynthia carry the boxes into the garage. 2 days later, I went out to get a jar of peach preserves from the storage cabinet and discovered that half my shelves had been rearranged. My gardening supplies were stacked on the floor. 3 plastic containers labeled Cynthia were sitting where they had been. I found her upstairs. Did you move my gardening things? She looked up from her phone. Oh, Walter did. Why we needed space. We. It was a small word, but I heard it. Cynthia, those shelves were organized. I'm sorry. I thought the garage was shared space. It is shared, between Walter and me. The moment I said it, her face changed. Her eyes lowered. I'm sorry, Rosalie. I didn't realize I was making you feel invaded. Now I felt cruel. That was something Cynthia was remarkably good at. Whenever I tried to establish a boundary, she somehow turned herself into the injured person. I didn't say invaded, you didn't have to. She stood. I'll move everything. You don't need to move everything. No, really. I don't want to cause trouble. That evening, Walter confronted me. Did you upset Cynthia about the garage? I stared at him. She told you that she was crying. I asked why my gardening supplies had been moved. She's trying to rebuild her entire life, Rosalie, and I'm trying to find my pruning shears. Walter shook his head and walked away. It would have been funny if it hadn't hurt. A few days later, the curtains disappeared from the guest bedroom. I noticed because I was carrying clean towels upstairs. The floral curtains I had chosen years earlier were folded on the floor. New gray ones hung in their place. Cynthia came out of the bathroom. You changed the curtains, they let in too much light. You could have asked. I didn't think you'd mind. That isn't really the point. She stared at me. What is the point, that this is my home? The words came out sharper than I intended. Cynthia's face tightened. Believe me, Rosalie, I know this isn't my home. Then she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. That evening, Walter barely spoke to me. The next morning, I found Cynthia reorganizing the pantry. Cans were on the counter. Boxes of pasta had been moved. My baking supplies were on a different shelf. What are you doing? She turned. Making things easier to find. I could find everything. She laughed. Well, you knew where everything was. Exactly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Cynthia placed a box of cereal on the shelf. I'm only trying to help. I appreciate that. But please ask before reorganizing my kitchen. Our kitchen, Walter said behind me. I turned. He was standing in the doorway. What? He looked uncomfortable. I mean, while Cynthia is here, she should feel like she can use things. Using the kitchen and reorganizing it are different things. Cynthia stepped away from the pantry. I'll put everything back. Again, the wounded voice. Again, Walter looked at me as though I had kicked a puppy. No one said you had to do that, he told her. I walked out before I said something I would regret. That afternoon, Natalie came over. My daughter had always been able to read my face faster than anyone. She found me folding laundry in the den. Okay, she said. What happened? Nothing. Mom, I'm folding towels. You fold towels when you're annoyed. I laughed despite myself. I also fold towels because eventually people need clean towels. Natalie sat beside me. Is Aunt Cynthia still here, obviously? How long has it been? Almost 3 weeks. Natalie raised her eyebrows. I thought Dad said 2. So did I. She glanced toward the kitchen. Cynthia was talking to Walter. Their voices were low. Natalie leaned closer. Is everything okay? I hesitated. I wanted to tell her. About the garage, the curtains, the pantry. The way Walter seemed irritated with me simply for existing inside my own boundaries. But Natalie was their daughter too. I had spent her entire childhood refusing to make her responsible for problems between her parents. I wasn't going to start now. Your aunt is having a difficult time. That wasn't my question. I folded another towel. We're adjusting. Natalie watched me. Mom, if something's wrong, I'll handle it. She didn't look convinced. At dinner, Cynthia was cheerful. Almost too cheerful. She told Natalie about an apartment she had seen online. It was adorable, she said. That sounds promising, Natalie replied. Cynthia glanced at Walter. But the rent was ridiculous. How ridiculous? Natalie asked. Almost $2,000 a month. That's pretty normal around here now. Cynthia sighed. I can't afford that while the divorce is unsettled. Walter put down his fork. There's no rush. I looked at him. Cynthia smiled. I know. Again, that wordless understanding passed between them. Natalie noticed it too. I could tell, but nobody said anything. After dinner, Natalie helped me clear the table. Dad seems different, she whispered. Different how I don't know. She glanced toward the living room. Like he and Aunt Cynthia are having a conversation nobody else is part of. I dried a plate slowly. You notice that I'm not blind. I forced a smile. Don't worry about it. Natalie touched my arm. Mom, I mean it. She studied me for another second. Then she nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. That night after Natalie left, I went upstairs early. Walter stayed downstairs with Cynthia. I read for almost an hour before realizing I had absorbed none of the words. Around 10:30, I heard Cynthia's voice, then Walter's. I went downstairs for water. The moment my foot touched the bottom step, their conversation stopped. Cynthia was sitting at the dining table with several papers in front of her. Walter stood beside her. "What are you two doing?" I asked. "Looking at some numbers," Walter said. "What numbers?" "Cynthia's finances." Cynthia gathered the papers quickly. "I'm trying to figure out what I can afford after everything is settled. Do you need help?" "No." She answered too quickly. Then she softened her voice. "Thank you, though." I poured myself a glass of water. Neither of them resumed the conversation while I was there. I stood at the counter longer than necessary. Eventually, Walter said, "Was there something else?" Something about his tone made me feel like an intruder. "In my kitchen." "No," I said. I went upstairs. The following afternoon, I found another box in the hallway. Then another. Cynthia had begun placing framed photographs on the dresser in the guest room. One showed her and Walter as children. Another showed their mother. I understood those. Then I noticed a small ceramic lamp I had never seen before, a jewelry box, a stack of books, a framed print. None of those things looked temporary. That evening I said to Walter, "We need to talk about how long Cynthia is staying." He sighed before I even finished. "Not tonight. When she's stressed. So am I." Walter looked genuinely surprised. "Why are you stressed?" I almost laughed. "Because another person has moved into our house, changed rooms, reorganized my kitchen, filled half the garage, and apparently has no departure date. She's my sister." "I know. She has nowhere else. She has options." "What options?" "An apartment. She can't afford one. Then she needs to figure out what she can afford." Walter stared at me. "That sounds cold." "No, Walter. That sounds practical." He shook his head. "You've changed." That hurt more than it should have. I had not changed. I had simply begun noticing things I had previously been expected to ignore. The next evening, I went upstairs around 9. Halfway down the hall, I realized Cynthia's bedroom door was open. She wasn't inside. Then I heard voices from Walter's study. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. At least that's what I told myself. I was about to continue toward my bedroom when Cynthia said something that stopped me. "You promised me this would be settled before the end of the month." I froze. Walter answered quietly, "I know. I can't keep living like this. Keep your voice down. I trusted you. And I told you I'm handling it. How much longer?" There was a pause. Then Walter said, "Just give me a little more time." My heart began beating harder. I took one step backward. The floorboard beneath my heel creaked. Silence. A second later, Walter appeared in the doorway. "Rosalie." I forced my face to remain neutral. I was looking for my reading glasses. His eyes stayed on mine. "They're probably downstairs." "Probably." Cynthia appeared behind him. She looked nervous. "What were you talking about?" I asked. Walter answered first. "Her divorce." Cynthia nodded. "My attorney keeps delaying things." I looked from one to the other. 3 weeks earlier, I would have accepted that explanation. Now I noticed Cynthia's hands. She was holding a folder tightly against her chest. And Walter looked less like a brother comforting his sister than a man afraid his wife had heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. I smiled. "All right." Then I walked away. Inside our bedroom, I closed the door and stood with my back against it. For the first time since Cynthia arrived, I stopped asking myself whether I was being unkind. I started asking a different question. What exactly had my husband promised his sister, and why did both of them seem so afraid that I might find out? The morning after I overheard Walter tell Cynthia to give him a little more time, I expected him to explain. He didn't. He ate scrambled eggs, complained about the weather, and asked whether I wanted him to pick up anything from the grocery store. Cynthia came downstairs 20 minutes later and behaved exactly the same way. That almost frightened me more than a confession would have. I watched the two of them move around my kitchen as though nothing had happened, and I began to understand something I had resisted admitting. Whatever they were discussing, they had agreed I wasn't supposed to know. Still, I didn't confront them. Not yet. 2 days later, Cynthia changed the subject from the guest room to my bedroom. I was folding sheets in the laundry room when she appeared in the doorway with one hand pressed against her lower back. I hate to complain again. That sentence had become Cynthia's favorite introduction to a complaint. What is it? I barely slept last night. The mattress again. She nodded. My back is getting worse. Did the topper not help a little? But that bed is so low and the room feels cramped. I keep waking up stiff. I'm sorry. She remained in the doorway. I waited. Finally, she said, Your mattress looks much firmer. I stopped folding. My mattress in your room. There was something almost casual in her voice. Yes. Walter said you bought it recently. 3 years ago. She rubbed her back. I slept on one like that at a hotel once. It was wonderful. I folded the sheet again, although it was already folded. That's nice. Cynthia didn't move. Then she said, Maybe we could switch rooms for a few nights. I looked up. She smiled. Just until my back settles down. No. Her smile disappeared. Oh, I'm happy to help you find another mattress topper. We could even look into renting a different mattress if necessary. But I'm not moving out of my bedroom. I was only asking. And I answered. Her face tightened. Of course. She walked away. I knew before dinner that she had told Walter. He waited until Cynthia went upstairs. Then he leaned against the kitchen counter. Could we talk? That depends. About Cynthia. Then I already know what this is about. Walter sighed. Rosalie, she's in pain. So she says. You think she's lying? I didn't say that. You're acting like she asked for your kidney. She asked for my bedroom. For a few nights. I looked at him. Do you honestly believe that he didn't answer immediately? That was answer enough. Walter. What? How long is Cynthia staying? We've been through this. No. I've asked. You've avoided answering. She doesn't know what's happening with her divorce. That still doesn't explain why she needs our bedroom. Our bedroom, he repeated. Yes. Ours. Which means you don't get to give it away without me. I'm not giving anything away. Then tell her no. He stared at me. You're being selfish. For a moment I genuinely thought I had misheard him. Excuse me, you heard me. I opened this house to your sister. I know. I made meals for her. I drove her to her attorney. I bought things to make her room comfortable. Half my garage is full of her belongings. And apparently you've been keeping score. I'm describing reality. Walter rubbed his forehead. Why does everything have to become a territorial dispute because people keep taking territory? His jaw tightened. It's a room, Rosalie. I stared at him. Behind him, the kitchen clock ticked. It's just a room, he repeated. That sentence landed harder than he understood. Our bedroom was where I had slept beside him through 41 years of marriage. It was where he held me the night my mother died. Where we sat on the floor wrapping Christmas presents when Natalie was little. Where I recovered after gallbladder surgery. Where Walter cried after his own mother's funeral because he didn't want Natalie to see him fall apart. My mother's cedar jewelry box sat on the dresser. My father's final birthday card to me was tucked inside the nightstand. There were photographs, letters, books, and memories that belonged to the private geography of my life. It isn't just a room to me. Walter softened slightly. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? He had no answer. I walked away. The next morning, my friend Carol called. She was having minor knee surgery and had arranged for her daughter to stay with her afterward, but her daughter's youngest child came down with the flu. I hate asking, Carol said, but could you stay with me for a couple of nights? I agreed immediately. In truth, I needed the distance. I told Walter I would be gone 3 days. He barely reacted. Cynthia was sitting at the breakfast table. That's nice of you, she said. Something about her expression bothered me. Before leaving, I stood in my bedroom doorway. I considered locking it. Then I felt ridiculous. This was my husband, my home. I should not need a lock. So I left. Carol's surgery went smoothly. For 3 days, I helped with meals, medications, and getting her safely around the house. Walter called only once. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. How's Carol? She's doing well. Good. How are things there? Fine. And Cynthia? She's fine. Another pause. Anything else? No. I almost asked him what he had promised Cynthia. Instead, I said goodnight. I drove home on Friday afternoon. It was just after 4 when I pulled into our driveway. Cynthia's car was there. Walter's truck was in the garage. Everything looked ordinary. Then I opened the front door. Walter. No answer. I carried my overnight bag upstairs. Halfway down the hallway, I stopped. There was a suitcase outside my bedroom. Mine. Beside it sat 2 cardboard boxes. One contained sweaters, the other contained shoes. For several seconds I simply stared. Then I saw my jewelry case, my robe, a framed photograph of my mother. My hands went cold. I walked to the bedroom door. It was open. Cynthia was standing at my closet. She was hanging a black dress where my clothes had been. Her clothes covered half the closet. Her cosmetics were arranged across my dresser. A framed photograph of Cynthia and Walter sat on the table beside my bed. She turned. Oh. That was all she said. Oh. I stepped into the room. What are you doing? Cynthia's face flushed. Walter thought it would be easier if we made the change while you were away. Walter appeared behind me. Rosalie. I turned slowly. You moved my things. Let's not start yelling. I'm not yelling. My voice was almost unnaturally calm. That seemed to unsettle him. Cynthia's back has gotten worse, he said. So you moved her into my bedroom temporarily. And you moved me where Walter glanced toward the stairs. The downstairs room. The downstairs room was barely more than a converted study. It held a narrow daybed we used occasionally when someone needed a quiet place to read. I looked at him. You moved your wife out of her bedroom while she was gone. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? Cynthia needs the space more right now. Cynthia stepped forward. Rosalie, I told him we should wait until you came home. I looked at her. But you moved in anyway. She fell silent. Walter exhaled. Can we please not create drama over this? That was the moment something inside me changed. Not broke. Changed. For weeks I had been defending myself, explaining, compromising, wondering whether I was selfish. But standing there among boxes containing pieces of my own life, I suddenly saw the situation clearly. Walter had not asked permission because he did not believe he needed it. He had expected anger, then tears, then eventually surrender, because that was what Rosalie did. Rosalie kept peace. Rosalie understood. Rosalie forgave. I bent down and picked up the photograph of my mother. Walter watched me. What are you doing, moving my things downstairs? His shoulders relaxed. That hurt too. He thought he had won. Cynthia looked almost embarrassed. Rosalie. It's fine. It wasn't. But I needed them to believe it was. I carried the photograph downstairs. Then the jewelry case. Then my overnight bag. I did not ask Walter for help. I did not ask Cynthia to remove anything. That evening they ate dinner together. I told them I wasn't hungry. Instead, I sat on the narrow bed downstairs staring at the wall. Above me, I could hear footsteps crossing what had been my bedroom. Around 9, I realized I had left my reading glasses in my desk. My desk was in the small home office across the hall. I switched on the lamp and opened the top drawer. It stuck. I pulled harder. The drawer slid open. That was strange. I always locked that drawer because it contained tax documents, insurance papers, and personal correspondence. The small key was kept inside my jewelry case. Yet the lock showed faint scratches around it. Someone had opened it. I moved aside a stack of folders. Behind our old tax returns was a cream-colored envelope I had never seen before. I pulled it out. It was thick. My name wasn't written on it. Instead, across the front was Walter's handwriting. I recognized the slant immediately. 6 words. Do not let Rosalie see this. I stood alone in the quiet office holding that envelope with both hands. Walter laughed at something Cynthia said. I looked toward the ceiling, then back at the envelope. An hour earlier I had thought the worst thing my husband could do was give my bedroom to his sister. Now I understood something far more frightening. The bedroom might not have been what Walter was really trying to give her. I held the envelope for nearly a minute before opening it. 41 years of marriage had taught me the shape of Walter's handwriting as intimately as the shape of his face. I knew the way his capital letters leaned forward. I knew how heavily he pressed a pen when he was worried. There was no possibility that someone else had written those words. Do not let Rosalie see this. My first instinct was to put it back. That may sound foolish after everything that had happened, but marriage creates habits that are difficult to break. Walter and I had never searched each other's phones. I had never opened mail addressed only to him. Even when I suspected he and Cynthia were hiding something, some part of me still believed privacy deserved respect. Then I looked at the scratched lock on my desk drawer. This wasn't Walter's drawer. It was mine, and someone had forced it open to hide something from me inside it. I slid one finger beneath the envelope flap. It had already been opened, so there was no seal to break. Inside were several folded documents. The first page carried the letterhead of a title company in Richmond. I read the opening paragraph twice. It referred to our property, our address, my home. The same colonial house where Walter and I had raised Natalie, planted trees, hosted Christmas dinners, buried 2 dogs in the backyard, and grown from young parents into grandparents. Why would a title company be corresponding with Walter about our house? I turned the page. There were phrases I didn't fully understand. Transfer of interest, ownership percentage, grantor, grantee, consideration, proposed deed preparation. Then I saw 3 names: Walter McBride, Rosalie McBride, Cynthia Bennett. My stomach tightened. I sat down. The chair suddenly felt too far from the desk, so I pulled myself closer and began reading from the beginning. According to the correspondence, someone had contacted the title company about restructuring an ownership interest in our property. There were handwritten notes in the margins. Walter's handwriting. One sentence had been underlined twice, spousal signature required. Beside it, Walter had written, Need R, need R. Need Rosalie. I could hear Cynthia moving upstairs. A drawer opened. Footsteps crossed the floor directly above me. My bedroom. I forced myself to continue. The next document appeared to be an unfinished draft. Some sections were blank, but Cynthia's name appeared in a space labeled Proposed Grantee. I didn't understand enough to know exactly what that meant, but I understood enough to know it was not about her divorce attorney taking too long. Walter had been discussing my house with his sister, and neither of them had told me. I turned another page. That was when I found the sheet of paper that frightened me most. At first I thought it was scrap paper. There were no headings, no letterhead, just handwriting, my handwriting, or something trying very hard to look like it. Rosalie McBride. My name appeared 7 times. The first attempt was poor. The R was too large. The second was closer. By the fourth, whoever had written it had copied the way I connected the letters in my last name. The sixth made my skin crawl. It looked almost right. I touched the paper as if doing so might explain it. For more than 30 years, I had signed insurance documents, payroll forms, school paperwork, mortgage statements, checks, birthday cards, tax returns. I knew my signature. These were imitations. Practice. Someone had been practicing my name. I stood so quickly the chair rolled backward. My first thought was Walter. I wanted to march upstairs, put the paper in front of him, and demand an explanation. I actually reached the office door. Then I stopped. I could hear their voices above me. Walter said something I couldn't make out. Cynthia laughed softly. That laugh changed my mind. If I confronted them now, what would happen? Walter would explain. Cynthia would cry. I would become angry. And somewhere inside all that emotion, I might lose the opportunity to learn what they were actually doing. I had spent more than 3 decades as an office manager. People often mistook organization for a boring skill. It wasn't. Organization taught you that details mattered, dates mattered, copies mattered, and when something felt wrong, you preserved the evidence before asking questions. I closed the office door, then I took out my phone. I photographed the first document, then the second, every page, front and back. I photographed the envelope. I photographed Walter's handwritten warning. Finally, I photographed the sheet containing the 7 versions of my signature. My hands were trembling by then. I checked every image to make sure it was readable. Then I emailed the photographs to an account Walter did not use and saved another copy in a private cloud folder. Only after that did I begin putting everything back. I arranged the documents in the exact order I had found them. I folded them along the same creases. I slid them into the envelope. Then I returned it behind the tax folders. I closed the drawer. It didn't lock. Someone had damaged the mechanism. That detail bothered me almost as much as the papers. Walter or Cynthia had been willing to force open something that belonged to me. I switched off the office lamp. When I stepped into the hallway, Walter was standing near the staircase. I nearly jumped. "There you are," he said. I forced myself to breathe normally. "What I was wondering where you went. I needed my reading glasses." His eyes moved toward the office. "Find them." Yes. That was the first deliberate lie I could remember telling my husband in years. It frightened me how easily it came. Walter nodded. "Cynthia and I were thinking about watching a movie." "That sounds nice. You want to join us, no?" "I'm tired." He studied me. "Are you still angry about the bedroom?" There were 7 copies of my signature sitting 10 feet behind me, and Walter wanted to know whether I was angry about the bedroom. I'm too tired to argue. His expression softened. "Rosalie, I know this isn't ideal." Ideal. What an astonishingly small word for what he had done. "It's temporary," he continued. I looked at him. "How temporary?" He hesitated. "We'll figure it out." There it was again. No date, no plan, just enough reassurance to keep me quiet. I smiled faintly. "All right." Walter seemed relieved. He reached for my shoulder. For the first time in our marriage, I had to stop myself from pulling away when my husband touched me. "You'll see," he said. "Things will settle down." I wondered whose things he meant. I slept badly that night. The daybed downstairs was narrow, but discomfort wasn't what kept me awake. I kept seeing my name. Rosalie McBride. Rosalie McBride. Rosalie McBride. 7 attempts. By 3 in the morning, I had constructed half a dozen explanations. Perhaps Walter had been looking into adding Cynthia to something temporarily. Perhaps those signatures had nothing to do with the house. Perhaps I had misunderstood the documents. Then common sense would return. People with innocent plans did not hide documents behind tax folders. They did not write warnings on envelopes. And they did not practice someone else's signature. At 7, I heard Cynthia in the kitchen. I waited 10 minutes before going out. She was making coffee in my robe. I stopped. It was pale blue with white piping along the sleeves. "My robe." She noticed where I was looking. "Oh." She touched the collar. "I hope you don't mind." It was hanging behind the bathroom door. For 1 second, anger nearly escaped me. Then I remembered the envelope. "Keep it." She blinked. "Really?" "Yes." I poured coffee. "You seem tired," she said. "I didn't sleep well. That little bed probably isn't very comfortable." I looked at her. She had the decency to look embarrassed. "Walter said this arrangement wouldn't be for long." "Did he?" Cynthia lowered her cup. "What does that mean?" "Nothing." She watched me carefully. Something passed through her expression. Fear, perhaps, or suspicion. Before either of us could say more, Walter entered. "Morning." Cynthia immediately turned toward him. I noticed it. A tiny movement. But it told me something. She was checking his face. He was checking mine. They were both measuring what I knew. So I gave them nothing. I made toast. I talked about the weather. I asked Cynthia whether her back felt better. She said it did. "Good," I replied. Walter seemed increasingly relaxed. By breakfast's end, he was discussing a football game. They believed I had surrendered. That afternoon, I drove to a coffee shop 20 minutes from home. I ordered tea, chose a table in the corner, and opened the photographs on my phone. In daylight, they looked even worse. I enlarged the title company letter. A contact name appeared at the bottom. There was also a reference number. I wrote both down. Then I examined the document with Cynthia's name. I still couldn't understand the legal language, but one fact was undeniable. Someone was exploring a change involving the ownership of my home. I thought about calling the title company. Then I stopped. If Walter had already spoken with them, I didn't know what he had told them. I needed someone who understood property documents, someone Walter couldn't manipulate. That was when I thought of Henry Collins. Henry had handled legal matters for my parents for years. After my father died, Henry helped my mother with estate paperwork. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 4 years, but I still had his number. I opened his contact information. My thumb hovered above the call button. Then my phone rang. "Walter," I answered. "Hello, where are you?" His question came too quickly. "Having coffee." Where I looked around the cafe. Why a pause? "No reason. I just wondered when you'd be home." "I'm not sure." Another pause. Then he said almost casually, "You weren't in the office again this morning, were you?" My entire body went still. "No." "All right." "Why?" "No reason. I thought I left something in there." "What, just paperwork?" I looked down at the photograph of the envelope. "Do not let Rosalie see this." "Did you find it? I think so?" His voice had changed. Only slightly. But after 41 years, I heard it. Fear. "I'll see you later," he said. The call ended. I sat staring at the phone. Then I understood something that made the hair rise on my arms. Walter wasn't merely hiding documents. He was checking whether I had found them. I looked again at Henry Collins's number. This time I didn't hesitate. I pressed call. Because whatever my husband was planning, I was finished trusting him to explain it after the damage was done. And before Walter learned that I had opened his envelope, I intended to find out exactly what he was trying to take from me. Henry Collins answered on the 4th ring. "Collins." For a second, hearing his familiar voice nearly broke the calm I had worked so hard to maintain. "Henry, it's Rosalie McBride." There was a brief pause. "Rosalie. Goodness, it's been a while." "It has. How are you?" I looked at the photographs on my phone. "I'm not sure." His tone changed immediately. "What happened? I found some papers." "What kind of papers? They're about my house." Another pause. "Your house on Hawthorne Lane?" "Yes." "And what about it?" "I think Walter is trying to change something about the ownership." Henry didn't respond right away. That silence frightened me. "Then you come to my office tomorrow morning?" he finally asked. "Yes." "Bring whatever you found. I only have photographs." "That's fine." Then his voice became firmer. "Rosalie, listen carefully. Until I've seen those documents, don't sign anything related to the house. Don't sign anything Walter gives you if you don't understand exactly what it is." My fingers tightened around the phone. "You think this is serious? I think I need to see the paperwork." That wasn't an answer. But it was enough. I drove home carrying a strange feeling I had never experienced in 41 years of marriage. I was afraid of what my husband might ask me to sign. When I arrived, Walter was in the garage. He looked at my car as I pulled in, then at his watch. "You were gone a while." I had another cup of tea. Where I looked at him. "Why are you so interested in my coffee habits?" "I'm making conversation." "No, you're asking questions." His expression tightened. Then he smiled. "Forget it." Cynthia was upstairs. I could hear her moving around in my bedroom. I went into the kitchen and began preparing dinner. The ordinary routine felt almost surreal. I chopped onions, washed potatoes, seasoned chicken. And all the while one thought kept repeating. Someone practiced my signature. Walter came in around 6. "Need help? No." He stood there for a moment. Then he said, "I've been thinking about our finances." I kept cutting vegetables. "What about them retirement stuff?" My knife stopped for half a second. "What retirement stuff? Nothing urgent." He opened the refrigerator. "We should probably organize some documents soon. Accounts, property, paperwork, beneficiaries. That sort of thing." I resumed chopping. "Why, now we're getting older." "So we were younger last week." He laughed. I didn't. Walter closed the refrigerator. "I'm just saying we should get everything in order. That sounds sensible." His shoulders relaxed. "I'm glad you think so." I wondered if the documents in my desk were part of Walter's definition of getting everything in order. The next morning I left the house at 9. I told Walter I had errands. That was technically true. Finding out whether my husband was trying to give away part of my home felt like an important errand. Henry's office was in an old brick building near downtown Richmond. When I entered, his assistant recognized me. Mrs. McBride, yes. Mr. Collins is expecting you. Henry came out himself. He was 67 now, his hair almost entirely silver, but he still had the same steady expression I remembered from my parents' kitchen table years earlier. He shook my hand. Come in. Once the door closed, I showed him the photographs. He put on his glasses. For several minutes he said nothing. He enlarged the images on my phone. Read, went backward, read again. Finally he looked at me. Does Walter know you found these number good? That single word chilled me. What exactly am I looking at? Henry leaned back. It appears someone has been exploring a transfer of an interest in the property to Cynthia. That's what the draft suggests. Can Walter do that? Not by himself. I exhaled. Then Henry added, but we need to review how title is currently held and the old agreement connected to your parents' contribution. My parents, you remember the money they put toward the house? Of course. Nearly 28 years earlier, Walter and I had fallen in love with the colonial house the first time we saw it. We couldn't quite afford the down payment. My parents could. My father had sold a small parcel of land outside Charlottesville and offered part of the proceeds to us. I had resisted. Dad insisted. A home is never wasted money, he told me. But there had been paperwork. I remembered signing documents in Henry's office. At 35, with a full-time job and a teenage daughter, I had cared more about getting the keys than understanding every legal sentence. Dad wanted something protected, I said slowly. Henry nodded. Yes. What's your contribution? My contribution. Technically, the funds your parents provided for your benefit. Your father was very particular about documenting where that money came from. I stared at him. Why? Henry hesitated. That's a longer conversation. First, I want the current records. He turned to his computer. Within minutes, he was accessing information and making notes. I watched his expression. Henry. He held up one finger. Then he made a phone call to someone in his office and requested an archived file. When he hung up, I asked, Am I losing my house? No. The answer came firmly. Relief flooded through me. Then he added, But I don't like what I'm seeing. I explained that the property arrangement included protections connected to the original funds from my family and subsequent estate planning. Walter had rights, so did I. But Walter could not simply promise Cynthia an interest and make it happen without my participation. Then why would he try? That's a question for Walter. And these signatures, Henry's face hardened. That concerns me more. They're not mine. I believe you. Could someone use one? Trying to use a copied or forged signature is very different from successfully completing a valid transfer. There are additional requirements. But Rosalie, this is exactly why I don't want you signing anything until we understand what's happening. I looked at the photograph again. Walter knows all this. Knows what? That he can't do it without me. Henry was quiet. He should. That word mattered. Should. I thought about Walter writing Need R beside the signature requirement. How much did Walter know about the agreement my father created? Henry took off his glasses. I was present when much of it was discussed. Something inside me sank. This wasn't simply Walter misunderstanding paperwork. He knew there were restrictions, perhaps not every detail, but enough. Henry promised to retrieve the archived file and call me. Before I left, he repeated the warning. Don't sign anything. I won't. And if Walter asks whether you've spoken to me, what should I say? Henry studied me. That depends on what you want him to know. For the first time, I understood why people paid lawyers for sentences like that. I drove home slowly. The autumn trees along the streets were beginning to turn orange and red. Normally, I loved Richmond in October. That morning, I barely noticed. When I pulled into the driveway, Walter was sitting on the porch, waiting. You've been gone a long time. I got out. So you keep telling me. Where were you running errands? What errands? I closed the car door. Walter, is there a reason you need an itinerary? He smiled awkwardly. No. I walked past him. Inside, Cynthia was talking on the phone. The moment she saw me, she turned away and lowered her voice. I went downstairs to my temporary room and placed my purse on the bed. 10 minutes later, Walter appeared in the doorway. Rosalie, yes. He leaned against the frame. I've been trying to organize some important documents. I looked at him. Retirement stuff. Exactly. What do you need? He hesitated. Do you remember where you keep your passport? The room seemed to shrink. My passport? Yes. Why for identification? For what? Walter rubbed the back of his neck. Some financial paperwork may require 2 forms of ID. What financial paperwork? Nothing you need to worry about. Henry's voice echoed in my head. Don't sign anything. I smiled. I'm not worried. So where is it I'd have to look? Walter nodded. Could you? Eventually. His expression tightened. I'd rather get this handled soon. Why the rush, no rush? But there was. I could see it. Your driver's license is current, right? He asked. Yes. And your passport hasn't expired, I don't think so. He nodded as though checking boxes on an invisible list. Then he left. I waited until his footsteps disappeared. I opened my jewelry case. My passport was beneath a stack of old photographs. I picked it up. Then I found my birth certificate, social security card, and the small envelope containing several other personal documents. For years I had kept them in predictable places because I trusted everyone inside my home. That trust no longer existed. I placed everything in my purse. Later that afternoon I drove to the bank. I rented a small safe deposit box. I put the documents inside. When I closed the metal drawer, I felt ridiculous and relieved at the same time. I was protecting my identification from my own husband. That evening, Walter asked again. Did you find the passport? Not yet. He frowned. You're usually organized. I am. Then how do you lose a passport? I didn't say I lost it. His eyes met mine. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Cynthia entered. Everything okay? Walter looked away. Fine. After dinner, I went downstairs. My phone rang around 8:30. Henry. I found the archived file, he said. I sat on the bed. And your father was more careful than I remembered. What does that mean? The original contribution was structured specifically to protect your financial interest. There were additional provisions incorporated later when your parents updated their estate planning. My mouth went dry. So Walter can't give Cynthia part of the house. Not the way these documents suggest. Certainly not without your informed participation. I closed my eyes. Henry, why would my father structure it that way? There was a pause. I think you should come back tomorrow. There are things in this file you need to see. Before I could answer, footsteps stopped outside my door. Walter. He knocked once and entered. I lowered the phone. Who are you talking to? My heart pounded. A friend. Walter looked at the phone, then at me. Henry remained silent on the other end. Walter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. By the way, he said, I really do need that passport. This time I didn't pretend not to understand. Walter wasn't asking because we were organizing retirement paperwork. He needed my identity. He needed my signature. And somewhere inside an old legal file, my father had apparently anticipated that one day I might need protection. I just didn't know yet whether he had been protecting me from the world, or from the man I married. The next morning, I returned to Henry's office expecting to learn more about my house. Instead, I learned that the house was only one piece of the problem. Henry had placed a thick file on his conference table. Sit down, he said. That was never a comforting sentence from a lawyer. I sat. Henry opened the file. I went through the archived documents last night. Your father's contribution toward the purchase of the house was substantial, and he documented it carefully. Later estate planning reinforced your protected interest, so Walter can't simply give Cynthia part of it. Correct. I exhaled. Henry didn't. There's something else. Of course there was. What yesterday you told me Cynthia left her husband because their marriage was collapsing. That's what she told us. Did she mention financial problems? Only that Frank's business was struggling. Henry pushed a sheets of paper toward me. I made a few inquiries based on the names and references in the documents you photographed. Nothing improper. Mostly public records and information connected to the proposed transaction. I looked down. Frank Bennett's name appeared several times. There were references to a contracting company business loans and secured obligations. I don't understand. Frank's business has significant debt. I knew it was struggling. This is beyond struggling. Henry pointed to another line. Cynthia appears to have signed personal guarantees connected to at least some of those obligations. My stomach dropped. She owes the money too, potentially. How much and under what circumstances would require a fuller review, but she has reason to be worried. Suddenly, Cynthia's panic made more sense. The boxes, the urgent conversations. I can't wait forever. You think creditors could come after her. I think Cynthia believes they might. I sat back. For one brief moment, I felt sorry for her again. Then I remembered my signature written 7 times on a piece of paper. Why would that involve my house? Henry folded his hands. If someone facing financial instability wants security and interest in real estate can look attractive. But if creditors are after her, wouldn't putting her name on property create another problem? Exactly. I stared at him. So Walter is risking our house to make Cynthia feel secure. I don't yet know precisely what Walter intends. I did. Or at least I was beginning to. Walter had promised Cynthia something would be settled before the end of the month. A place. Security. A piece of something permanent. My home. Henry leaned forward. Rosalie, I need to ask you another question. Have you reviewed your retirement accounts recently? The question seemed unrelated. No. When was the last time? Maybe 6 months ago. Who manages the statements? Walter handles most of the online accounts. Henry's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Check them. A cold sensation traveled through my chest. Why? Because if Walter has been helping Cynthia financially, you need to know how. I left his office 20 minutes later. I did not drive home. I parked outside a branch of our bank. For several minutes, I sat inside the car staring at the entrance. I felt ashamed. That surprised me. Walter was the one hiding things. Yet I felt ashamed for checking. Marriage had trained me to think of financial privacy as mistrust. Then I reminded myself of the passport, the signatures, the envelope. I went inside. A banker named Melissa helped me reset access to accounts I had not personally logged into for months. There was nothing strange in checking accounts. The savings account was lower than I expected, but not dramatically. Then we reached one of our retirement accounts. I stared at the balance. That can't be right. Melissa turned the screen slightly. What balance were you expecting? I gave her the approximate figure from the last statement I remembered. She clicked through the history. My throat tightened. There had been several withdrawals, not one, several, some smaller, some much larger. When were these made? She showed me. The earliest was months before Cynthia moved into our house. I began writing them down. $8,500, $12,000, $6,000, $17,500, more. When we totaled the transactions, the number was just under $74,000. I stared at it. $74,000. Money Walter and I had spent decades saving. Money meant for medical expenses, for home repairs, for the years when neither of us could work anymore. Where did it go? Melissa could only show me the transfers. Several had gone through an account I recognized as Walter's personal checking account. Others had moved through a secondary account. I asked for printed records. She gave me what she legally could. I walked outside carrying the papers in a folder. I sat in my car. Then I cried. Not loudly. There was no dramatic breakdown. Tears simply started falling. 41 years. That was the number that hurt more than 74,000. 41 years of saying our money, our retirement, our home, our future. Walter had changed the meaning of our without telling me. My phone rang. Natalie. I almost didn't answer. Hi, sweetheart. Mom? She heard it immediately. What's wrong? Nothing. That's not true. I wiped my face. I'm sitting in the car. Where at the bank? Why I couldn't tell her. Not yet. I had some paperwork to handle. There was a pause. Is Dad with you? No. Mom, you're scaring me. I'm okay. Promise I looked at the folder on the passenger seat. I'm going to be. That was the first promise I had made in days that I fully intended to keep. I returned to Henry. He reviewed the transaction records. Do you recognize these withdrawals? Num. Did you authorize them? Num. Did Walter ever tell you he was withdrawing retirement money? Num. Henry removed his glasses. Then you need a complete accounting. You think it went to Cynthia? I think you need proof. I nodded, but in my heart I already knew. That evening I got my proof. I came home around 5. Walter was outside. Cynthia was upstairs. I carried groceries into the kitchen and started dinner as though nothing had happened. Walter joined me. You seem quiet. Long day. Doing what errands? He gave me a strange look. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it. A message preview appeared. Cynthia, thank you for covering the 12. I swear I'll pay you back when everything settles. Walter snatched up the phone. Too late. I had seen it. The 12 what I asked. His face changed. What Cynthia thanked you for covering 12. It's personal. Personal between you and your sister. Yes. Does it involve money? Walter stared at me. Then he locked the phone. She needed help. How much help? We're not doing this right now. How much? His jaw tightened. I said not now. He walked out. My hands were shaking, but I kept stirring the soup. 10 minutes later, Cynthia came downstairs. She had no idea what I had seen. Smells good, thank you. She opened the refrigerator. I watched her. Cynthia. Yes. How bad are Frank's business debts? She froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. She closed the refrigerator. Frank's finances aren't really something I want to discuss. But Walter's finances are. Her face lost color. Excuse me. Nothing. I turned back to the stove. Cynthia stood there another moment. Then she left. Within 5 minutes I heard her speaking quietly to Walter. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. They knew I was getting close. The following morning Henry called. I've reviewed what we have, and the most likely explanation is that Walter has been financing Cynthia's immediate expenses and trying to create some longer-term security for her. With our retirement money. Yes. And the house, potentially. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Why would he do something so reckless? People do irrational things when they believe they're rescuing family. He thinks he can put Cynthia on the house temporarily. That would be my guess. And then what? Perhaps remove her later. Perhaps compensate you somehow. Perhaps he hasn't thought that far. That doesn't sound like Walter. No, Henry said quietly. It sounds like a frightened brother making decisions he doesn't have the right to make. That distinction mattered. Walter wasn't trying to destroy me. But good intentions did not make dangerous choices safe. I returned home around noon. Cynthia was sitting alone at the dining table. A folder lay beside her. She closed it when I entered. How was your morning? She asked. Educational. Her eyes narrowed. I placed my purse on the counter. Cynthia, do you plan to live here permanently? What, you heard me. She looked toward the hallway. Walter wasn't there. I don't know what my future looks like. That isn't what I asked. She stood. Walter said I would always have somewhere safe. There it was. Not 3 weeks. Not until the divorce. Always. What exactly did Walter promise you? Her expression changed. I think you should ask your husband. I'm asking you. Cynthia picked up the folder. He said he would take care of me. With what? She didn't answer. My retirement money. Her eyes widened. That told me enough. Rosalie. Or my house silence. Her face answered before her mouth could. I stepped closer. How much did he promise you? It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. I said there were ways to protect me until the divorce was settled. Using my home. Our family has no. My voice stopped her. Do not call it the family house. You did not buy it. You did not pay the mortgage. You did not spend 28 years maintaining it. Cynthia's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. For the first time I believed her completely. But I was scared too. And somehow nobody had decided that my fear mattered. I'm sorry you're scared, I said, but you do not get to build your safety out of mine. She looked away. That afternoon, I stood in the downstairs room staring at the retirement statements. Almost $74,000. A bedroom, a hidden envelope, a forged-looking signature, a promise of permanent security. The pieces were finally beginning to fit. Walter had convinced himself he was rescuing his sister, but he wasn't using only his own money to do it. I was using our retirement, our home, my name. And what frightened me most was the possibility that Walter believed all of it could be fixed later. As though trust could be withdrawn and redeposited like money. As though a house could be transferred and simply transferred back. As though a wife could be betrayed quietly and expected to forgive loudly. Then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Mrs. McBride. Yes. This is Allison Reed from Commonwealth Title Services. I'm calling to confirm your appointment regarding the Hawthorne Lane property. I stopped breathing. What appointment? There was a pause. The document verification appointment, ma'am. My hand tightened around the phone, and then she said the words that turned suspicion into something far more dangerous. We already have the preliminary paperwork bearing your signature. For several seconds after the woman from Commonwealth Title Services told me they already had paperwork bearing my signature, I couldn't speak. Mrs. McBride, I'm here. Would Thursday morning at 10 still work for the verification appointment? I looked toward the ceiling. Cynthia was somewhere upstairs. Walter had gone out less than an hour earlier. Neither of them knew I was on this call. I forced my voice to remain calm. Before we confirm anything, could you remind me exactly what the appointment is for? There was a slight pause. Of course. The woman introduced herself again as Allison Reed and explained that the company had received preliminary documents concerning a proposed change in property interest for our Hawthorne Lane address. She spoke professionally but cautiously. There are still identity and execution requirements before anything can be finalized, she said. So nothing has been completed, no, ma'am. Relief came so quickly my knees weakened. I sat on the edge of the daybed. And you said you have my signature on preliminary paperwork submitted to our office, yes. I looked toward my purse. Inside it were copies of the 7 practice signatures. Could you tell me when those documents were submitted? Allison gave me the date. 5 days earlier, I had been at Carol's house. My husband had been moving me out of my bedroom, while paperwork carrying my name was being submitted to a title company. The timing was too perfect to ignore. Who submitted them? Another pause. I'd prefer to have our closing officer discuss the file with you. Why? Because I don't want to give you incomplete information. That answer told me she had become suspicious too. I lowered my voice. Ms. Reed, I need you to understand something. I did not sign any document concerning a transfer of my house. Silence. Then Allison's tone changed completely. Mrs. McBride, thank you for telling me. What happens now, I'm going to flag the file immediately. Nothing will move forward through our office until the issue is reviewed. I closed my eyes. Thank you. Do you have an attorney? Yes. Please have your attorney contact us. I will. And Mrs. McBride. Yes. Do not sign anything you don't fully understand. It was the second time in 2 days someone had given me that warning. After we hung up, I called Henry. He answered almost immediately. I explained everything. Did you tell them the signature wasn't yours? Yes. Good. They're flagging the file. Also good. Send me the contact information and reference number. I did. Then I asked the question I was afraid to ask. Henry, could Walter have completed this without me? Not properly. The verification requirements exist for exactly this reason. But someone tried. Yes. The word landed heavily. Can you get a copy of whatever they submitted? I'll request it. How long? Hopefully today. I spent the next 3 hours pretending my life was normal. I washed towels, watered plants, made a grocery list. At one point, Cynthia came downstairs wearing one of my old sweaters. I noticed but said nothing. She seemed unsettled after our conversation about the house. Are you going somewhere? She asked. No. You look dressed up. I was wearing black slacks and a blouse. Hardly formal. I felt like looking nice. She smiled uncertainly. You always do. There was something almost sad about her that morning. For a moment I wondered what fear could make a woman cross boundaries she once would have respected. Then I remembered my signature. Fear might explain behavior. It did not erase responsibility. At 2:15, Henry called. I have it. My stomach tightened. The document. Yes. Can I come over? I think you should. I reached his office 25 minutes later. A printed document lay on his desk. Henry turned it toward me. Take a look. I recognized our address immediately. Then Walter's name, then Cynthia's. And near the bottom of the page, Rosalie McBride. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Seeing the imitation on scrap paper had frightened me. Seeing it on an actual document was different. It felt like seeing someone wearing my face. That isn't mine. You're certain absolutely. Henry nodded. I expected you to say that. I studied it. Whoever had copied the signature had chosen one of the better attempts. The R was close. The final curve of McBride was almost correct. But the middle letters were too careful. My real signature had become faster and messier with age. This one looked like someone trying not to make a mistake. It's copied. That would be my concern. From where I don't know yet. I looked at the rest of the document. So they sent this in thinking I had signed. It appears to be preliminary material intended to begin preparing the transaction. But the company still required direct verification and properly executed final documents, which explains the appointment. Yes, Walter needed my passport, possibly for identification. A chill ran through me. And if I had given it to him? Henry leaned back. I don't want to speculate beyond the evidence. That was lawyer language for nothing good. What do I do? Do I do for now nothing? I stared at him. Nothing visible. He tapped the document. The file has been stopped. You're protected from this transaction moving forward through that company without proper authorization. What we don't know is who created this signature, what Walter believes has already happened, or what he intends to ask you to sign. So I wait. You observe. I thought about the old Rosalie, the woman who filled silence because silence made other people uncomfortable, the woman who apologized even when she wasn't wrong, the woman who believed a peaceful home was worth almost any compromise. That woman suddenly felt very far away. I can do that. Henry gave me a long look. I believe you can. When I returned home, Walter's truck was in the driveway. He was waiting in the kitchen. Cynthia sat at the table. Both looked up when I entered. Where were you? Walter asked. Out. Doing what I placed my purse on the counter. Walter, lately you seem unusually interested in my schedule. He forced a laugh. Just asking. Cynthia stared into her coffee. I wondered whether she knew about the forged document. I wondered whether she had written my name 7 times. I wondered whether Walter had. For the first time, I looked at both of them and realized I no longer knew which possibility hurt more. Dinner was almost silent. Afterward, I went downstairs. At 8:30, Walter knocked on the door. He was carrying a blue folder. My heart began pounding. Can I come in? You're already standing in the doorway. He entered. I finally got some of that retirement paperwork together. There it was. The performance had begun. He sat beside me and opened the folder. Several documents were clipped together. These are mostly routine. Mostly, you know what I mean. No, Walter, I don't. He looked irritated. Beneficiary updates, planning documents, things we should have handled years ago. I reached for the papers. Walter kept one hand on them. I can explain where to sign. I looked at his hand, then at him. I'd rather read them. His fingers remained on the stack. Rosalie, it's 10 pages. I can read 10 pages. You don't need to analyze every sentence. I worked in insurance for 30 years. Reading documents was literally part of my job. He smiled without humor. Fine. He released the papers. I read slowly. Some pages were harmless. One related to beneficiary information. Another concerned an account update. Then I reached a document with our property address. Walter shifted beside me. I noticed. What is this estate planning? It mentions the house, because the house is part of our estate. And Cynthia Walter's face tightened. where I pointed. Her name appeared inside a paragraph discussing a proposed future interest. He leaned closer. That's just language the planner included. What planner, Rosalie? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm reading. It's about making sure everything is organized. Organized for whom he stood. Why are you acting like I'm trying to steal something from you? I looked up at him. I almost said it. I almost told him about Commonwealth title, about Henry, about the forged signature. Instead, I asked, why does Cynthia need to appear on paperwork concerning our home? Walter rubbed his face. She's in a vulnerable position. So I'm trying to make sure she has some protection. With our house, it's not that simple. Then explain it. He began pacing. It would be temporary. There it was. Exactly what Henry had predicted. Temporary ownership. Not ownership exactly. Then what an interest. Security. Something she could rely on until the divorce is finalized. And afterward, we change it back. I stared at him. He actually believed that explanation should satisfy me. You want to put your sister's name into something involving our house and simply change it back later. I'm trying to help my family. I'm your family. He looked away. That hurt more than if he had shouted. I closed the folder. I'm not signing this tonight. Walter's head snapped toward me. Why not? I want time to read everything. It's straightforward. Then waiting shouldn't be a problem. His jaw tightened. How much time? As much as I need. He stared at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. Rosalie, there are deadlines. What deadlines? He hesitated. Financial deadlines. Whose? He didn't answer. I handed him the folder. Good night, Walter. He remained standing there. You don't trust me. 41 years of marriage sat between us. I could have lied. Instead, I said, right now I trust myself enough to read before I sign. Walter left without another word. I waited until his footsteps disappeared upstairs. Then I opened my phone. There was an email from Henry. Attached was the copy from the title company. I enlarged the signature again. The fake Rosalie McBride stared back at me. Walter had just tried to persuade the real Rosalie McBride to sign documents without reading them. That told me something important. Whatever had been submitted earlier wasn't enough. They still needed me. My real signature. My real identification. My real consent. And for the first time since Cynthia entered my house, I understood where my power was. It was in the one thing Walter had apparently assumed he could eventually obtain. My yes. He had already taken my bedroom without asking. He had taken money without asking. Someone had even taken my name without asking. But my consent was still mine, and I had no intention of giving it away. Walter barely spoke to me the next morning. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, stirring the same cup of coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. Cynthia remained upstairs. The blue folder lay on the counter. Neither of us mentioned it. Finally, Walter said, we should finish that paperwork today. I buttered my toast. I told you I want to read it. You had all night. I was sleeping. He gave a short laugh. You used to trust me with paperwork. I used to have no reason not to. His spoon stopped. What is that supposed to mean? It means exactly what I said. Walter leaned back. You've been acting strange ever since you came home. I looked at him. You moved me out of my bedroom while I was gone. We're back to that. We never finished it. Because there's nothing to finish. Cynthia needed the room. And you decided her need mattered more than my consent. Walter pushed his chair back. This is exhausting. So stop making decisions for me. He left the kitchen. I watched him go and realized something important. Walter still thought our conflict was about my attitude. He did not yet understand that I knew about the money, the title company, or the false signature. That gave me an advantage. I intended to keep it until I understood exactly what he had promised Cynthia. Around noon, Walter returned with the blue folder. He placed it in front of me. Let's just handle this. I opened it. Walter uncapped a pen. Sign here. He pointed to a line. I didn't touch the pen. What am I signing? I explained this last night. No. You called it retirement planning. That's part of it. What's the other part? Walter exhaled. Estate planning. And the house. Yes, Rosalie. The house is an asset. Assets are included in estate planning. I turned the page. Cynthia's name appeared again. Why is your sister included in our estate planning? She's vulnerable. That's not a legal explanation. You know what I mean. No, I know what you keep saying. His voice hardened. Can you please stop interrogating me? Can you please stop asking me to sign documents you don't want me to read? Walter stood. I don't know what happened to you. I looked up. Maybe I started paying attention. His face changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. Fear again. I turned another page. What percentage were you planning to give Cynthia? It isn't a gift. What is it? A temporary interest. How much? It's complicated. Then simplify it. Walter walked toward the window. She needs something she can show as security while the divorce is being resolved. Security for what she has obligations. What obligations? That's Cynthia's business. If my house is involved, it becomes my business. Our house. Then why wasn't I included in the conversation? Walter turned. Because I knew you'd react like this. For a moment the room became very quiet. You hid it because you knew I would say no. I hid nothing. I almost laughed. The envelope in my desk seemed to burn inside my memory. Then why didn't you tell me I was going to? When I had a solution. A solution to what? Before Walter could answer, Cynthia entered. She stopped when she saw the folder. Oh, that little word again. I looked at her. Come in. I don't want to interrupt. You're already part of the paperwork. You might as well be part of the conversation. Walter immediately said Rosalie. No. Cynthia should hear this. Cynthia remained near the doorway. I tapped the document. What exactly did Walter promise you? Her eyes moved to her brother. Cynthia, Walter warned. That answered more than either of them realized. She knew. I'm asking you, I said. Cynthia folded her arms. He said he would help me. We've established that. Help you how? I'm going through a divorce. And I may walk away with almost nothing. That doesn't explain my house. Her expression hardened. It's Walter's house too. Yes. He worked his entire life, so did I. I didn't say you didn't. You implied his work gives him the right to decide what happens to the house. Walter stepped between us. That's enough. No, I said. It isn't. I had spent weeks being told when enough was enough. For once I decided. I looked at Cynthia. How much do you know about these documents? She glanced down. Walter explained some things. What things? That there might be a way for him to give me temporary security. Using the house. Yes. The word came quietly. But he said it wouldn't hurt you. I stared at her. He told you that? She nodded. He said nothing would really change. I almost admired the absurdity. Nothing would change. Except her name appearing in paperwork connected to my property. Except nearly $74,000 disappearing from retirement accounts. Except my bedroom becoming hers. Except someone copying my signature. You moved into my bedroom knowing Walter was also trying to give you an interest in the house. Cynthia's face reddened. That's unfair. Which part? You make it sound calculated. Wasn't it? No? She stepped forward. I'm trying to survive, and I'm apparently expected to finance your survival. Walter raised his voice. Rosalie, stop. I turned toward him. Did you tell Cynthia about the retirement withdrawals? Silence. Cynthia looked at Walter. His face drained. How do you know about that? There it was. Not what withdrawals. How do you know? I checked our accounts. You went through the accounts behind my back. I almost couldn't believe him. They're my accounts too. I handle the finances. You handle them. You don't own them. Cynthia looked increasingly uncomfortable. I should go upstairs. No, I said. Stay. Walter slammed his palm against the table. Enough, I didn't flinch. You withdrew nearly $74,000. I helped my sister. With money we saved together. I was going to replace it. When things settled. The phrase seemed to govern everything. After the divorce. After Cynthia's debts. After the paperwork. Later, Walter would repair whatever he damaged today. And now you want me to sign something involving the house. It's temporary. You keep saying that as though temporary decisions can't have permanent consequences. I know what I'm doing. Then why do you need my signature? Walter went silent. I watched him. That question had found the center of the problem. If you have the right to do this, I continued. Why do you need me? Because we're married. That isn't an answer. There are formalities. Formalities. He looked away. Cynthia spoke. Walter put his whole life into this house. I turned slowly. She should have stopped there. She didn't. He paid for repairs. He worked overtime when you first bought it. He remodeled the kitchen. He built the deck. Why are you acting like he has no right to make decisions? I felt something inside me become perfectly still. I never said Walter had no rights. Then why are you blocking everything? Because his rights do not include giving you mine. Cynthia opened her mouth. I continued. You arrived here asking for 3 weeks. Then your boxes came. Then you rearranged my kitchen. Then you moved into my bedroom. Now I discover Walter has been trying to attach your name to paperwork involving the house. I didn't ask to take anything from you. Did you tell him no? She froze. Did you tell Walter, I won't accept an interest in your home unless Rosalie agrees? Nothing. Did you? Her eyes filled. No. Then you were willing to receive something that belonged partly to me without ever speaking to me. Walter said, she was desperate. So desperation gives her ownership. Nobody said ownership. Then tell me exactly what you're giving her. Walter couldn't. I looked at the signature line, then at the pen. I'm not signing. Walter's expression hardened. Rosalie, don't do this. Do what punish Cynthia because you're angry with me. This isn't punishment. You're making her situation worse. No, I'm refusing to make my situation worse to fix hers. Cynthia wiped her eyes. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. I looked at her. You're right. I don't. Then I glanced toward the staircase leading to the bedroom she had taken from me. But I'm beginning to understand what it feels like when someone else decides what you're allowed to keep. Nobody spoke. Walter picked up the pen. 41 years, Rosalie. What about them? We've been married 41 years. Are you really telling me you don't trust me enough to sign one document? I looked at the man I had married when I was 22. I remembered holding his hand in hospital waiting rooms, raising Natalie together, burying our parents, paying mortgages, surviving layoffs, celebrating anniversaries. Trust was not one document. Trust was 41 years of small promises. And Walter had been spending those promises without telling me. I trust 41 years enough to know when something doesn't feel like my husband. He stared at me. I pushed the folder toward him. My attorney will review anything you want me to sign. Walter's face went white. Your attorney, Cynthia, looked sharply at him, then at me. You hired a lawyer? I consulted one, when Walter asked. That's not important. Who? I didn't answer. Walter began pacing. You've turned this into something ugly. No. I finally looked at what was already ugly. Cynthia suddenly snapped. This is ridiculous. Walter has every right to help me. He spent decades putting money and labor into this house. There it was again. Entitlement. Not gratitude. Not desperation. Entitlement. I stood. Cynthia was several inches taller than me, but at that moment I didn't feel small. I looked directly into her eyes. Who told you Walter could give you something that wasn't his to give? Silence. Cynthia looked at Walter. Walter looked at the floor. And in that silence I finally understood. This wasn't an idea they were still considering. Walter had already promised her something. Something specific. Something large enough that Cynthia believed she had a claim to my home. I picked up my coffee. I'm done discussing paperwork today. Walter stared at me. This isn't over. No, I said. For once we agree. I walked toward the downstairs room. Behind me, Cynthia whispered something. Walter answered sharply. Their voices rose. The alliance that had seemed so solid for weeks was beginning to crack. I closed the door behind me. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Henry. I opened it. Rosalie, I've reviewed additional correspondence from the title company. We need to talk about who initiated the proposed transfer and what Walter represented to Cynthia. Call me when you're alone. I stared at the message. Upstairs, Cynthia was shouting now. You promised me, Walter answered. I said I would handle it. No, Walter. You said I would never have to worry about losing a home again. I stopped breathing. There it was, the promise. Not a few weeks in the guest room. Not temporary help, not simply money. Walter had promised his sister permanent security in a house he did not have the right to promise. And as I stood inside the little room he had moved me into, I realized the cruelest part. My husband had guaranteed Cynthia that she would never lose a home. He had simply never stopped to consider whether keeping that promise might cost me mine. I waited until the house was quiet before calling Henry. Walter and Cynthia had stopped arguing about 20 minutes earlier. I heard Walter go into the kitchen, then the back door opened and closed. Cynthia went upstairs. I locked the downstairs bedroom door before making the call. Henry answered immediately. You're alone. Yes. What did you find? I think Walter promised Cynthia more than temporary help. How much more I told him what I had overheard. You said I would never have to worry about losing a home again. Henry was silent for a moment. That fits what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? The correspondence suggests. Walter presented this as a way of creating a meaningful property interest for Cynthia, not simply letting her stay in the house. I closed my eyes. He promised her part of it. It appears that way. And he never asked me. No. There was something about hearing Henry say that one word that made everything final. Walter had spent weeks trying to turn a promise he had made privately into a decision I would be expected to approve publicly. Henry, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If I had signed those papers without reading them, could Cynthia have ended up with an actual interest in the house? There would still have been additional formalities. But your signature could have moved the process significantly forward. My stomach tightened. So Walter was hoping I would just sign. I can't tell you what Walter was hoping. I could. For 41 years, I had signed things Walter placed in front of me. Tax forms, insurance renewals, investment updates. Not because I was careless, because I trusted him. Walter had built his plan around that trust. Rosalie Henry continued. There's still one question we need answered. The signature. Yes, I assumed Walter did it. Don't assume. Who else? Cynthia had access to the house. Possibly to your records. Possibly to documents containing your signature. I remembered my desk drawer, the damaged lock, my old tax returns, and Cynthia rearranging everything she touched. My skin went cold. I need to know. We'll work on that. After the call, I sat alone in the darkness. For the first time, I allowed myself to remember Cynthia and Walter before all of this. Their childhood had never been easy. Their father Raymond left when Walter was 17. Cynthia was 11. One Friday afternoon, Raymond packed 2 suitcases and drove away. He sent birthday cards for a few years. Then even those stopped. Their mother Evelyn worked mornings in a school cafeteria and evenings at a nursing home. Walter became the man of the house before he was old enough to understand what that meant. He made Cynthia breakfast, walked her to school, fixed her bicycle, sat outside the bathroom door when she cried because their father had missed another birthday. Walter once told me that when Cynthia was 12, she asked him, "Are you going to leave too?" He promised her he wouldn't. I had always loved that story. Now I wondered whether that promise had followed him for 50 years. The next morning, Walter asked me to talk. Not about paperwork, about Cynthia. We sat at the dining table. He looked exhausted. I owe you an explanation. Yes. I seemed surprised that I didn't make it easier for him. I promised Cynthia I would help her. I know. More than money. I know that too. Walter looked at me carefully. How much do you know enough that you should stop deciding which pieces I'm allowed to hear? He rubbed his hands together. When Frank's business started collapsing, Cynthia called me. How long ago? About 8 months. 8 months. Long before the suitcases. Long before the tears at our front door. You knew all this before she moved in. Yes. Did you know about the personal guarantees? Yes. And the creditors? Yes. I swallowed my anger. What did you promise? Walter stared at the table. I told her she wouldn't end up homeless. That sounds compassionate. I meant it. What else? He hesitated. Walter. I told her I'd find a way to give her some security. With our house. With an interest in the house. There it was. Finally spoken aloud. How much? We never settled on an exact percentage. We. He winced. I chose the wrong word. No. I think you chose the honest word. He looked away. I continued. You and Cynthia discussed how much of our house she might receive. It was never supposed to hurt you. Stop saying that. I'm trying to explain. You don't get to define whether something hurts me before telling me it exists. Walter's shoulders dropped. I thought it could be temporary. Why? Because once the divorce was finished and the debt situation stabilized, we could restructure everything. Back to normal. Yes. I almost smiled. And what was normal supposed to look like after I learned my husband secretly gave away retirement money and tried to put his sister into our property? Walter had no answer. Instead, he said, You don't understand Cynthia. No, Walter. You don't understand me. He looked up. You see your sister as that 11-year-old girl waiting for her father to come home. His eyes changed. You think every time she is frightened you have to save her. She's my sister. I know. She could lose everything. So you decided I should take the risk instead. That's not what I did. It is exactly what you did. Walter stood. I was trying to protect someone I love. And I'm asking why protecting her required deceiving someone else you claim to love. He turned toward the window. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, Did you forge my signature? Walter turned so quickly his chair moved. What? You heard me. His face went pale. I would never do that. There is a document at Commonwealth Title Services carrying my signature. Walter stared at me. You contacted them, I asked you a question. I didn't sign your name. Did you know someone had no? The answer came quickly. But something in his expression disturbed me. Not guilt. Recognition. Walter. I didn't forge your signature. But he looked toward the staircase. That tiny movement told me everything. You think Cynthia did? I didn't say that. You looked upstairs. Rosalie. Did Cynthia tell you she was submitting paperwork? She said she was trying to speed things up. My breath caught. What does that mean? She was frustrated. She said everything was taking too long. And you didn't ask what she intended to do. I told her not to do anything stupid. That isn't an answer. Walter sat down again. I didn't want to know every detail. I stared at him. There it was. A different kind of betrayal. Not action. Cowardice. You deliberately didn't ask. I was overwhelmed. You deliberately didn't ask because if you didn't know you could tell yourself you weren't responsible. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. Cynthia appeared at the bottom of the staircase. Neither of us had heard her coming down. What are you talking about? Walter stood. Nothing. I almost laughed. That word had done a remarkable amount of work in our house. Nothing. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was being hidden. Nothing was permanent. Nothing would hurt me. I looked at Cynthia. Did you submit paperwork to Commonwealth Title? Her face changed. Walter said, Rosalie, not now. Did you? Cynthia stared at me. I sent them some documents. Did one have my signature? Silence. Her mouth opened, then closed. Walter looked at his sister. Cynthia. I thought it was just preliminary. His face drained. What did you do? Her eyes filled with tears. Don't look at me like that. You said we had to get this moving. I never told you to sign Rosalie's name. I didn't say you did. The room went still. Cynthia had answered a question no one had asked. Walter stepped backward. I felt strangely calm. Did you sign my name? I didn't forge anything. Then what did you do? I submitted a draft. With my signature. It was only to get the process started. My heart was pounding. Where did you get it? Cynthia's lips trembled. I don't remember. That's a lie. Walter raised his voice. Cynthia, answer her. She turned on him. Don't you dare act innocent now. I didn't tell you to copy her signature. But you knew I was trying to make this happen. I didn't know you were doing that. You didn't want to know. The sentence landed like a hammer. Walter stopped speaking. Cynthia began crying. You kept saying there had to be a way. You kept telling me Rosalie would eventually understand. You said once everything was settled she would forgive you. I looked at my husband. He couldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than the $74,000. More than the bedroom. Perhaps even more than the signature. You told her I would forgive you, Walter whispered Rosalie. No. Answer me. I thought once you understood why I stood, you planned my forgiveness before you even told me about the betrayal. He looked broken. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Cynthia wiped her face. I was scared. So was I. You don't know what it feels like to think you might lose everything. No, I said quietly. But you were willing to let me find out. She looked down. Walter reached toward me. I stepped back. His hand fell. For 41 years, Walter had been the person I moved toward when something frightened me. Now he was the person I needed distance from. And as I looked at him, I finally understood why the forged signature mattered beyond the document itself. Walter may not have written my name, but he had created the room in which someone else believed she could. He had made promises with my property, spent money without my consent, hidden documents. And when Cynthia pushed further, he chose not to ask questions because ignorance was more comfortable than responsibility. That afternoon I called Henry again. I think Cynthia created the signature, I said. Do you have confirmation? Not completely. Then we keep following the evidence. I looked toward the ceiling. Walter says he didn't know. Henry was quiet. Then he said not knowing and choosing not to know are two different things. I closed my eyes. Yes, that was exactly what Walter had done. And now that the truth was beginning to split their alliance apart, I had one decision left that frightened me more than any legal document. I had to decide whether 41 years of marriage were strong enough to survive what Walter had chosen not to know. Natalie came to the house the following afternoon. I hadn't called her. Walter had. I learned that when I heard the front door open and my daughter's voice carry through the hallway. Dad, I was sitting downstairs with copies of the retirement statements spread across the little desk. A moment later, Natalie appeared in my doorway. She took one look at me. Mom, what is going on? I slowly gathered the papers. What did your father tell you that you two are having some kind of disagreement about Aunt Cynthia? I almost laughed. A disagreement. That was like calling a house fire an argument with the stove. Come in. Natalie closed the door. Dad sounded terrible. He should. Her face changed. What happened? I had spent my entire adult life protecting my daughter from problems between her parents. Even when she was grown, some instinct in me still wanted to say everything was fine. But everything was not fine. And hiding the truth was beginning to feel too much like what Walter had done to me. So I told her. Not every detail. Enough. The $74,000, the property documents, the title company, the signature that wasn't mine. By the time I finished, Natalie had stopped interrupting. She sat perfectly still. Dad took $74,000 almost. Without telling you, yes. For Aunt Cynthia, yes. And he was trying to put her on the house. He calls it a temporary interest. Natalie stared toward the ceiling. And your signature? I didn't sign it. Then who did I believe Cynthia submitted it? Natalie stood. I'm going upstairs. Natalie. No. She opened the door. I need to talk to Dad. I don't want you in the middle. She turned. Mom, I'm already in the middle. He called me. That was true. Walter had invited our daughter into the situation expecting sympathy. He had simply given her an incomplete story. I followed Natalie upstairs. Walter was in the living room. Cynthia sat near the window. The moment Natalie entered, Walter stood. Thank you for coming. Natalie folded her arms. Did you take almost $74,000 from your retirement accounts to give? Aunt Cynthia. Walter looked at me. You told her I did. He shook his head. That was between us. Natalie stared at him. You called me. I wanted you to help your mother calm down. The room went silent. Natalie's expression changed. You called me to manage Mom. That's not what I meant. It sounds exactly like what you meant. Cynthia stood. I think I should leave. Natalie turned toward her. No, Aunt Cynthia. I think you should stay. Cynthia sat back down. Walter rubbed his forehead. This has gotten completely out of control, no, Natalie said. It sounds like Mom finally found out what was already happening. I had never seen my daughter speak to her father that way. Neither had Walter. You don't understand the situation, he said. Then explain it. Cynthia is facing financial ruin, and that gives you the right to use Mom's money. It was our money. Exactly. Yours and hers. Walter looked away. Natalie continued. And the house I was trying to protect my sister. By hiding it from your wife. It was complicated. No, Dad. The paperwork may be complicated. Asking your wife before giving someone else an interest in her home is not. Walter flinched. Cynthia began crying quietly. Natalie noticed but didn't soften. Then she asked the question I had been afraid to ask directly. Who signed Mom's name? Cynthia looked down. Walter answered. I didn't. I didn't ask who didn't. Silence. Cynthia wiped her eyes. I submitted a preliminary document. With Mom's signature, I thought it was just to get the process started. That isn't what I asked. Cynthia's breathing became uneven. Finally, she whispered yes. The words seemed to change the air in the room. Walter sat down. I felt no surprise, only confirmation. Where did you get my signature? I asked. Cynthia looked at me. I found an old insurance form. In my desk. She hesitated. Yes. The scratched lock. My stomach tightened. You forced open my desk. The drawer wouldn't open, because it was locked. I didn't think no. You did think. My voice remained calm. That's the problem. You thought about what you needed and decided my boundaries were less important. Cynthia covered her face. I was panicking, Natalie asked. So you copied Mom's signature? Cynthia lowered her hands. I scanned the old form. I tried to recreate it on the draft. 7 times I asked. Her eyes widened. She knew immediately what I had found. You saw that, yes. Walter looked between us. 7 times I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Cynthia whispered I needed it to look close enough for them to prepare the file. Walter stood abruptly. You told me you were just sending information. You forged Rosalie's signature. It wasn't supposed to be the final signature. That doesn't matter. Cynthia stared at him. Then anger replaced her shame. Don't you dare do this. Do what pretend you had nothing to do with it. I never told you to sign her name. No. You just kept telling me to make things happen. Walter shook his head. That is not the same thing. You said Rosalie would resist if she saw everything too early. My eyes moved to Walter. He froze. Cynthia continued. You said we needed to get the paperwork prepared first, then explain it when there was something concrete. Cynthia. You said she would eventually understand. Stop. No. You wanted this too. Walter's face reddened. I wanted to help you. I did not want you forging my wife's signature. And when I told you I was handling the paperwork, did you ask how? Walter didn't answer. Cynthia laughed bitterly. That's what I thought. Natalie looked at her father. Dad Walter sat slowly. I knew Cynthia was pushing the process. Did you know she had Mom's signature? No. Did you ask what she submitted? No. Why not? He said nothing. I answered for him. Because he didn't want to know. Walter looked at me. I was overwhelmed. You keep saying that like it absolves you. It doesn't. That surprised me. Walter lowered his head. It doesn't. For the first time since this began, he sounded less defensive. But Natalie wasn't finished. She stepped closer to him. Do you understand what you did to Mom? Walter looked up. I hurt her. No. Natalie's voice broke. You made her protect herself from you. Walter's face changed. You're the person she trusted with everything. Her money, her house, her future. Natalie, no, Dad. Listen. Tears filled my daughter's eyes. You turned the woman who trusted you for 41 years into someone who has to hire a lawyer to make sure her own husband doesn't give away her property. Walter looked at me. I had not cried until then. But I did now. Not because Natalie was cruel, because she had found the exact words I had been unable to find. I had hired Henry to protect me from my husband. Walter covered his mouth with one hand. Cynthia stared at the floor. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Walter said, "I'm sorry." I wiped my face. "I don't know what that means anymore. It means I'm sorry. For what?" He stared at me. "All of it. That's too easy." His shoulders sank. "Then tell me what you need. I need you to understand what you did before you ask me what fixes it." Walter nodded slowly. For once, he didn't argue. My phone rang. "Henry." I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Rosalie, I have an update." "What?" "The title company provided additional material." My pulse quickened. "Does it confirm Cynthia submitted the signature?" "Yes. There's an electronic trail associated with the file transmission." I looked through the doorway at Cynthia. She was sitting with her hands clasped tightly. And Walter. The submission itself appears to have come from Cynthia. I exhaled. Then Henry added, "But there are communications showing Walter knew she was trying to accelerate the transaction." I closed my eyes. "So legally he didn't forge it. Based on what I've seen, no. But he knew enough to stop asking questions. That appears closer to the truth." When I returned to the living room, Walter looked at me. "What did Henry say?" I didn't ask how he knew it was Henry. Perhaps we were finished pretending. "He confirmed Cynthia submitted the document." Cynthia closed her eyes. Walter looked relieved for half a second. "I saw it. So I told you, don't." His relief disappeared. "You don't get to celebrate because your hand wasn't holding the pen." I wasn't celebrating. "You created the plan. You made the promise. You gave her money. You hid documents. And when she started pushing things forward, you chose not to ask how." Walter nodded. "Yes." Cynthia whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her. She seemed smaller than she had when she first arrived. "I believe you're sorry that this happened." Her eyes filled again. "I'm sorry I did it. That matters." I paused. "But it doesn't undo it." She nodded. Walter looked toward me. "What happens now?" For weeks he had been the person making decisions. Who stayed, who moved rooms, where money went, what I was allowed to know. Now everyone was looking at me. I stood. "First, the property transaction stays stopped." Walter nodded. "Second, no money moves anywhere without both of us knowing." Another nod. "Third, Cynthia needs to begin finding somewhere else to live." Cynthia looked up. Walter opened his mouth. I raised my hand. "No." He stopped. "She will not be thrown onto the street. I'm not interested in revenge. We'll give her reasonable time." Cynthia began crying again. "But this arrangement is ending." Walter looked at his sister. Then at me. This time he said, "Okay." I walked toward the stairs. For the first time since Carol's surgery, I went all the way up to the second floor without stopping. I stood outside my bedroom. Cynthia's belongings were still inside. Her clothes, her photographs, her perfume on my dresser. But something had changed. I no longer saw a room someone had taken from me. I saw something I had temporarily allowed other people to believe they controlled. Behind me, Walter said my name. "Rosalie." I turned. He stood several feet away. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "I know." Then I opened the bedroom door. "But tomorrow I'm taking my room back." And from the expression on Walter's face, he finally understood that I wasn't asking permission. The next morning I took my bedroom back. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no suitcases thrown onto the lawn. I had spent too many years believing strength had to look like anger before I finally understood that sometimes strength was simply making a decision and refusing to negotiate it. At 8:30, I knocked on the bedroom door. Cynthia opened it wearing the pale blue robe she had borrowed from me. Behind her, the room looked almost completely hers now. Her perfume bottles covered my dresser. Her clothes filled the closet. A stack of divorce papers sat on Walter's side of the bed. "I need you to start packing," I said. Cynthia's eyes dropped. "Today?" "Yes." She stepped aside. "I thought you said I had reasonable time to find somewhere else." "You do. I'm not asking you to leave the house today." I entered the room. "But you are leaving this bedroom today." She looked around. Where am I supposed to sleep? The guest room. The mattress is the same mattress you were sleeping on before Walter moved me out. She didn't finish the complaint. For the first time, Cynthia seemed to understand that discomfort was no longer going to rearrange my life. I can help you move your things, I said. You don't have to. I know. She studied my face. Why would you help me? Because I'm setting a boundary, Cynthia. I'm not trying to humiliate you. Her eyes filled with tears. I never meant for any of this to happen. I looked at the woman standing in my robe in my bedroom, surrounded by possessions she had brought into my home, while secretly discussing an interest in my property with my husband. I believe you never imagined the consequences, I said. That's different from saying you didn't mean your choices. She lowered her head. I'm sorry. I know. I pointed toward the closet. Let's start with the clothes. Walter appeared 20 minutes later. He stood in the doorway while Cynthia folded dresses into a suitcase. What's happening? I didn't stop working. Cynthia is moving back to the guest room. He looked at his sister, then at me. All right. That was it. No argument. No lecture about compassion. No accusation that I was selfish. Something had changed in Walter too. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was finally understanding that he had lost the right to ask me for another compromise. He picked up one of Cynthia's boxes. I'll take this down the hall. Cynthia stared at him. For years, Walter had rescued her before she experienced discomfort. This time, he carried the box to the guest room and came back without offering to solve anything else. By noon, the bedroom was mine again. Cynthia removed her photographs, her cosmetics, her paperwork. The blue robe was folded on the bed. I picked it up. For some reason, that simple piece of clothing nearly made me cry. I hung it behind the bathroom door. Then I opened the closet. Half of it was empty. My clothes were still downstairs in boxes. Walter stood behind me. Do you want help bringing your things back? No. He nodded. I understand. I turned. I don't think you do. He looked at me. Then tell me. I glanced around the room. When you moved my belongings out, you didn't just move clothes. I know. No, listen. He remained silent. You decided that Cynthia's comfort mattered more than my right to be consulted. You made me a guest in my own marriage. Walter swallowed. I'm sorry. I'm going to bring every box back myself. His face tightened. Why? Because I need to feel myself putting my life back where it belongs. He nodded. Then he left. It took me almost 2 hours. I carried sweaters upstairs, shoes, books, my jewelry case, the framed photograph of my mother. Each trip felt strangely ceremonial. When I placed my mother's photograph back on the dresser, I touched the glass. You would have told me to stop being polite weeks ago, I whispered. I could almost hear her answer. By 3 that afternoon, my room looked like mine again. But I still wasn't finished. Henry had emailed me several documents that morning. The proposed title transaction was officially frozen. Commonwealth Title had marked the file as disputed and would take no further action based on the materials previously submitted. Henry was also helping me establish safeguards around our finances. Walter would provide a complete accounting of every withdrawal. No substantial transfers would happen without both of us knowing. The $74,000 wasn't going to magically reappear, but secrecy was ending. That mattered. I printed Henry's email and carried it into the kitchen. Walter was sitting at the table. I placed the paper in front of him. What's this confirmation that the title transaction is stopped? He read it, then nodded. Okay. I'm also separating access to certain funds until we understand everything that happened. Walter looked up. You're freezing me out, no. I'm preventing either of us from making unilateral decisions. I told you I won't move any more money, and I believed you before. He flinched. I didn't enjoy that. There was a difference between accountability and cruelty, and I had no desire to cross it. I'm not trying to punish you, I said. I know. Do you? Walter looked at the document again. I'm starting to. That afternoon, Cynthia began searching for apartments. I saw her at the dining table with her laptop. For the first time, Walter was not sitting beside her. "How long do I have?" she asked. "I'm not giving you a countdown." She looked surprised. "I want you somewhere safe. I want you to find something you can reasonably afford. After what I did, what you did was wrong. That doesn't require me to become cruel." Her eyes filled. "But you do need to leave," I continued. She nodded. "I understand. And you need to solve your financial problems with professionals who understand them. An attorney, a financial counselor, whoever is appropriate. Not Walter. Especially not Walter." A faint, sad smile crossed her face. "That may be the first thing we completely agree on." 2 days later, Cynthia toured an apartment complex about 15 minutes away. It wasn't luxurious. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, shared laundry room. But she could afford it with careful budgeting and whatever settlement eventually came from her divorce. Walter wanted to offer money for the deposit. I watched the impulse appear on his face before he spoke. Cynthia saw it too. "No," she said. Walter blinked. "I didn't say anything. You were about to." He looked almost embarrassed. "I can cover the deposit." "Walter, I'm just saying no." This time the word came from Cynthia. She looked at her brother. "You've done enough." Something passed between them. A lifetime of dependency compressed into one quiet moment. Walter nodded. "All right." Cynthia signed the lease herself. She paid the deposit from her own account. I did not congratulate her as though she were a child, but I was glad. 3 days later, a moving truck arrived. Natalie came to help. So did I. Walter carried boxes quietly. By late afternoon, the guest room was empty again. Cynthia stood near the front door holding her purse. "I don't know when you'll want to see me again," she said. I answered truthfully. "Neither do I." She nodded. "I understand." Then she looked toward the stairs. "I'm sorry about your room. I thought about everything that room had come to represent. The room was the easiest thing to take back." Cynthia understood. Her face crumpled. She hugged Natalie. Then Walter. When she turned toward me, she stopped. She didn't assume she could touch me. I appreciated that. "Goodbye, Rosalie." "Goodbye, Cynthia." After the door closed, the house became quiet. The kind of quiet I used to love. Walter stood beside me. "It feels empty. It feels like two people live here again." He looked at me. "Does it?" I knew what he meant. Were we still two people building one life? Or merely two people occupying the same address? "I don't know yet." He nodded. That evening, Walter followed me upstairs. I entered the bedroom. He stepped in behind me. I turned. "What are you doing?" His expression was confused. "Going to bed." "No." The word came easily. "Rosalie, you're sleeping in the guest room." He stared at me. "For how long, I don't know." His face tightened. "I thought taking the room back meant—" "It means I took my bedroom back." I paused. "It does not mean I took my husband back." Walter looked as though I had struck him. I hated seeing that pain. But I did not take the words back. 41 years don't disappear," he said. "I know. I made terrible decisions. Yes, I'm trying to fix them. I know." "Then what else do you want?" I looked at him. "The part you still don't understand." "What part? You keep treating this like a list." I counted softly. "Cynthia moves out. The title transfer stops. The accounts are protected. The bedroom comes back. And then you expect the marriage to reset." Walter said nothing. "Trust doesn't work like paperwork." His eyes lowered. "I don't know how to fix that. For once, Walter, maybe you're not supposed to know immediately." He nodded slowly. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned. "Good night, Rosalie." "Good night." He closed the door behind him. I stood alone in my bedroom. My mother's photograph was back on the dresser. My robe hung behind the bathroom door. My books were beside the bed. Everything looked almost exactly as it had before Cynthia arrived. Almost. On Walter's nightstand, I placed our wedding photograph. Not because I had forgiven him. Not because I had decided our marriage would survive. I placed it there because 41 years were real, even if the last few months had wounded them. I wasn't ready to erase our history. but I was no longer willing to let that history decide my future. The next morning, Henry called. "There's one more thing in the archived property file," he said. "What a document I initially thought was just supporting correspondence. What kind of document? A letter?" From whom? Henry paused. "Your father." My hand tightened around the phone. "My father has been dead for 18 years. I know. What does the letter say?" "I think you should read it yourself." "Why?" Another pause. "Because it was addressed to Walter." I stopped breathing. "And Rosalie?" "Yes. Based on the date, Walter received it before you ever moved into that house." I looked around the bedroom Walter had claimed he believed he could partially give away. Suddenly, one question mattered more than all the others. What had my father told my husband nearly 3 decades ago? And why had Walter never told me the letter existed? I was at Henry's office before 10 the next morning. The letter was waiting on his desk inside a clear, protective sleeve. For several seconds, I couldn't touch it. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. My father Samuel had written in heavy block letters because years of working with his hands had made his fingers stiff. Even birthday cards looked as though they had been drafted for a business meeting. At the top was a date from nearly 28 years earlier, 2 weeks before Walter and I closed on the house. Below it were 2 words: "Dear Walter." My throat tightened. "Where did you find this?" Henry sat across from me. "It was included with the original property file. Why, your father asked me to keep a copy." I looked up. "Did you know what it said generally?" I hadn't read it in many years. "Did Walter receive the original?" "Yes." "You're certain I was present when your father gave it to him?" I stared at Henry. "So Walter has known about this for 28 years?" "Yes." I looked back at the letter. Why didn't anyone tell me? Henry considered his answer. "Your father wasn't trying to keep it from you. He saw it as a private conversation between himself and his son-in-law." That sounded exactly like Dad. He believed certain conversations should happen man to man. Sometimes I loved that old-fashioned quality in him. At that moment I wasn't sure. "Can I read it?" Henry nodded. "Of course." I removed the letter carefully. The paper was yellowed around the edges. Then I began. "Walter, I want you to understand why Margaret and I are helping you and Rosalie buy this house. This money is not payment for anything, and it is not a judgment on your ability to provide for your family. You have worked hard, and I respect that. We are doing this because Rosalie is our daughter, and because every parent wants to know his child will have somewhere safe to stand if life ever changes." I stopped. My eyes blurred. Henry quietly pushed a tissue box toward me. I wiped my eyes and continued. "The money we are contributing is intended for Rosalie's long-term security. The legal documents Henry prepared reflect that purpose. I hope you and Rosalie grow old in this house together. I hope none of these protections are ever needed. But if life becomes difficult, if money becomes tight, or if circumstances change between you, I expect you to remember why these arrangements were made. Do not treat Rosalie's security as something you can trade away to solve another problem." My hands began shaking. I read that sentence again. "Do not treat Rosalie's security as something you can trade away to solve another problem." 28 years earlier. My father had written those exact words. Not because he predicted Cynthia, not because he distrusted Walter, because he understood something I had taken decades to learn. A protected boundary only mattered when life became difficult enough to tempt someone to cross it. I continued. "You are her husband, and I trust you to honor that. I hope one day when I am gone, you will understand that protecting Rosalie does not mean making every decision for her. It means making sure she always has the freedom to make decisions for herself. Take care of my girl. Samuel." I couldn't speak. I placed the letter on the desk and covered my mouth. For 18 years, my father had been gone. Suddenly, I could hear his voice as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. "Take care of my girl." Henry waited. Finally, I whispered, "Walter kept this." "Yes." "And he still tried to do exactly what Dad told him not to do." Henry said nothing. "He knew the money was meant to protect my interest." "Yes." "He knew the house couldn't simply become something he used to rescue Cynthia. He knew the original purpose of the arrangement." I looked at him. Then why did he pretend this was just complicated paperwork? That's something only Walter can answer. I thought about the cream-colored envelope, the title company documents, the handwritten warning. Do not let Rosalie see this. Suddenly I understood why the envelope had frightened Walter so much. It wasn't simply because I might discover his plan. There was something in that envelope or connected to those papers that reminded him he already knew the plan was wrong. Henry, was this letter copied with anything Walter recently requested? Henry leaned back. That's interesting. What, several months ago, Walter requested copies of portions of the old property file. My stomach tightened. He did, yes. When Henry checked his notes, about 6 months ago, 2 months after Cynthia first began calling him about her financial problems. Did you send him the letter? My assistant sent the entire requested section. This letter was included. I stared at him. So Walter didn't just remember it from 28 years ago. No. He saw it again 6 months ago. Yes. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply stopped trying to protect Walter from the full meaning of what he had done. He had read my father's warning again. He had been reminded that the money used to establish our home was intended specifically to preserve my security. Then he had gone forward anyway. I folded the copy Henry gave me and placed it inside my purse. Thank you. What are you going to do? Asked my husband how long he planned to keep lying to himself. When I returned home, Walter was in the backyard. He was clearing leaves from the deck. For a moment I watched him through the glass door. That deck had been one of Cynthia's arguments. Walter built it. Walter repaired the roof. Walter worked overtime. All true. But marriage was never supposed to be an accounting contest. I had worked too. I had paid bills, raised our daughter, managed our household, contributed to the mortgage, cared for Walter after surgery, cared for his mother when she became ill. A marriage could not be reduced to who hammered the most nails. I stepped outside. Walter. He turned off the leaf blower. We need to talk. His face changed. All right. Inside. We sat at the dining table. I placed the folded letter between us. Walter looked at it, then at me. What is that you tell me? He unfolded it. I watched his face as he read. Before he reached the bottom, his shoulders sank. You remember it? Yes. How long? What do you mean? How long did you remember this letter while you were making plans with Cynthia? Walter stared at the page. I always remembered your father wrote me something. That isn't what I asked. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't remember every word. Henry sent you another copy 6 months ago. His hand stopped. There it was. No escape. I was reviewing the property documents. I know. Walter closed his eyes. So you read it? Yes. And after reading it, you still promised Cynthia security in this house. I thought there was a way to do both. Protect me, and give away part of what protected me temporarily. I laughed once. It sounded more painful than angry. There's that word again. Rosalie, I tapped the letter. My father told you not to trade away my security to solve another problem. I know. Those are almost his exact words. I know. And you did it anyway. I was desperate. No. Cynthia was desperate. You decided her desperation was yours to solve. Walter looked down. I thought I could fix everything before it became permanent. That's why you hid it. He didn't answer. That's why the envelope said not to let me see it. His head lifted. You found the envelope. I found it the night you gave Cynthia my bedroom. Walter's face drained. How much was in there? Enough? Rosalie, no. I pulled the letter closer. This is what I need to understand. You knew. Tears appeared in his eyes. I knew. It was the first completely honest answer he had given me. You knew Dad protected that money for me. Yes. You knew you needed my informed consent. Yes. You knew I might say no. Yes. And instead of asking me, you tried to arrange everything so I would feel pressured to say yes later. Walter looked broken. Yes. I leaned back. The truth hurt. But strangely, it also gave me peace. For weeks, Walter had wrapped his choices in confusion. Complicated finances, temporary arrangements, family obligations. Now all of that was gone. He knew. He chose. Those facts were painful, but they were clean. How long were you planning to keep this from me? Walter looked at the letter. Until I had solved Cynthia's problem. That could have taken years. I know. So maybe years. His silence answered. I looked at the man I had loved for most of my adult life. Do you know what hurts the most? The money, no. The house, no. He looked confused. The signature. That wasn't you. Then what I touched my father's letter. You knew exactly what this house meant. Walter's eyes filled. You knew it was never just real estate. My parents wanted me to have something nobody could quietly take from me. He covered his face. And you became the person I needed that protection from. Walter began to cry. I had seen him cry only a handful of times. His mother's funeral, Natalie's wedding, the day our first dog died. I did not comfort him, not because I wanted him to suffer, because his grief belonged to him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I believe you. He looked up. But being sorry isn't the same as being trustworthy, I know. For once he didn't ask what he could do to fix it. He simply sat with what he had done. That evening I took my father's letter upstairs. I placed it inside the cedar jewelry box my mother had given me. Then I sat on the edge of my bed. For weeks I had thought the envelope was the secret. It wasn't. The real secret was that Walter had never been confused about my rights. He had understood them all along. And downstairs my husband was finally facing a truth he had avoided since Cynthia first asked him to rescue her. He had not betrayed me because he didn't know where the boundary was. He betrayed me because he knew exactly where it was and convinced himself that love for his sister gave him permission to cross it. For the next 11 days, Walter slept in the guest room. I didn't ask him to move back. He didn't ask. That silence was different from the secrecy that had filled our house before. Back then, silence had been used to hide things. Now it seemed to be giving both of us space to look at things we could no longer hide from ourselves. Walter stopped bringing me solutions. That may sound like a small change. It wasn't. For weeks, every apology had been followed by a proposal. He would replace the money. He would undo the paperwork. He would move Cynthia. He would reorganize the accounts. I would fix everything. Now he simply did what needed to be done. He gave Henry every bank statement Henry requested. He provided records of the transfers to Cynthia. He contacted the retirement administrator and began working with a financial advisor to determine what could realistically be restored. Of the nearly $74,000 he had withdrawn, some had paid Cynthia's attorney, some had covered overdue business-related obligations, and $12,000 had gone toward preventing a collection action that Cynthia believed could threaten what little she still owned. Not all of it could be recovered. Walter finally stopped pretending otherwise. One evening he placed a spreadsheet on the kitchen table. This is everything. I looked at it. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every payment, dates, amounts, explanations. At the bottom, Walter had written, total $73,860. I read the number twice. Is this complete? Yes. No more accounts? No. No cash advances? None. No promises to Cynthia. I still don't know about. He looked me directly in the eyes. No. That last answer mattered more than the spreadsheet. I folded the paper. What are you going to do about it? I've increased the amount going into my retirement account. I canceled the fishing trip with David next spring. I'm selling the boat. I looked up. Your boat. Walter had wanted that boat for almost 15 years before buying it. It's worth around $26,000 if I'm patient. You love that boat. I do. Then don't sell it because you think sacrifice equals forgiveness. He was quiet. That isn't why. Why then? Because I spent money that belonged to both of us without asking you. He looked at the spreadsheet. If replacing part of it means giving up something that belongs only to me, that seems fair. For the first time, I didn't hear performance in his voice. I heard accountability. I'm not promising that fixes anything, he added. Good. He almost smiled. I'm learning. A few days later, Cynthia called me. I stared at her name on my phone until the ringing nearly stopped. Then I answered. Hello, Rosalie. Yes, I hope it's okay that I called. I answered. She gave a nervous laugh. I suppose that's something. I waited. I wanted to tell you I met with a bankruptcy attorney. That surprised me. And he thinks there are options. Good. I also met with a financial counselor. Also good. Another pause. I should have done those things months ago. Yes. She didn't argue. I kept thinking Walter could make everything disappear. I sat at the kitchen table, and Walter kept thinking the same thing. I know. Her voice broke slightly. I made him responsible for things that were mine to face. That doesn't excuse what he did. I know. And it doesn't excuse what you did. I know that too. For once, Cynthia didn't cry immediately. She didn't tell me how frightened she had been. She didn't remind me of Frank's debts. She simply said, I copied your signature. Yes. I broke into your desk. Yes. I accepted money I knew came from accounts you shared with Walter, even though I never asked whether you agreed. Yes. Each admission landed quietly. I'm ashamed. I closed my eyes. There had been a time when hearing those words would have satisfied something in me. Now they simply made me sad. What happens next? She asked. With us? Yes. I don't know. I miss you. That surprised me more than anything else. Before all of this, Cynthia and I had never been best friends. But we had shared holidays, hospital waiting rooms, family weddings, Thanksgiving recipes. We had once laughed so hard while trying to assemble a crib for Natalie's first baby that Walter threatened to take the screwdriver away from both of us. I miss who I thought we were, I said. Cynthia began crying. This time I let the silence remain. Finally, she whispered, Is there any chance you'll forgive me? I thought about my father's letter, about the false signature, about the bedroom. Then I answered carefully, I think forgiveness is possible. She inhaled sharply. But forgiveness is not permission to return to the way things were. I understand. I need distance. You can have it. And if we rebuild anything, it will be slowly. Yes, without Walter managing it. A small laugh escaped her through the tears. Definitely without Walter managing it. That made me smile despite myself. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time. I realized I didn't hate Cynthia. That mattered. Anger had protected me when I needed it. I didn't want to build a permanent home inside it. 2 days later, Walter asked whether I would go somewhere with him. Where your parents' cemetery. I stared at him. Why I need to do something. I almost refused. Then I saw the folded piece of paper in his hand. My father's letter. We drove to Charlottesville mostly in silence. The cemetery was small and shaded by old oak trees. My parents were buried side by side, Samuel and Margaret, married 53 years. Walter stood in front of their headstone for several minutes. Then he spoke. I made your father a promise. I didn't answer. He trusted me. Yes. I told myself helping Cynthia didn't mean I was betraying you. His voice shook. I told myself I could put everything back before you were really hurt. I looked at the headstone. That was convenient. I know. Walter unfolded the copy of Dad's letter. He told me protecting you meant protecting your freedom to decide for yourself. Yes. And I did the opposite. He began crying. I thought being a good husband meant fixing problems. I looked at him. Sometimes being a good husband means admitting the problem isn't yours to fix. He nodded. I know that now. He looked toward my father's name. I'm sorry, Samuel. The words nearly broke me, not because my father could hear them, because Walter finally understood whom he had betrayed, not only me, the man he had been trying to be. On the drive home, Walter said I made an appointment with a counselor. I turned toward him. For us. For me. That surprised me. I think I need to understand why I did this before I ask you to trust that I won't do it again. I looked out the window. The trees blurred past. That sounds sensible. I'd like us to go together eventually. Maybe. He nodded. Maybe is more than I expected. 3 weeks passed. Walter went to counseling every Tuesday. He never told me what he discussed unless I asked. I didn't. Some things needed to belong to him. The boat sold for $25,800. Walter deposited every dollar into the retirement account. He showed me the receipt. I nodded. Thank you. He didn't say, "Does this mean you forgive me?" That mattered. Natalie visited often. At first, she watched her father carefully. Then gradually, the tension softened. One Sunday afternoon, I found them repairing the loose railing on the back porch. For a second, the sight transported me backward 20 years. Walter holding a drill, Natalie teasing him about measuring everything 3 times. Normal. But not the old normal. Something new. Something more honest. That night, Walter was washing dishes when I said, "You can move out of the guest room." He stopped. The water continued running. He turned it off. "Are you sure?" "Yes." His eyes filled with hope. I raised one hand. "Walter." He waited. "This doesn't mean everything is repaired. I know. It doesn't mean I've forgotten. I know. And it doesn't mean you get to stop doing the work. I know." I studied him. Then yes. Walter nodded. "Thank you." That night he carried his pillow upstairs. Nothing else. He stopped at the bedroom door. "Can I come in 41 years?" He had never asked permission to enter our bedroom. I understood what the question meant. Yes. He entered. We didn't embrace. There was no dramatic reconciliation. We simply got into bed. For a long time we lay facing opposite directions. Then Walter said quietly, "Rosalie, yes, I'm glad you opened the envelope." I stared into the darkness. "So am I. If you hadn't. But I did." He fell silent. I thought about the woman I had been the night I found it. Displaced. Confused. Still wondering whether protecting myself made me selfish. I hardly recognized her. Then Walter whispered, "Good night. Good night." His hand rested on the mattress between us. Not touching me, not asking, just there. After several minutes, I moved my hand closer. Our little fingers touched. Nothing more. It wasn't forgiveness completed. It wasn't trust restored. It was simply two people acknowledging that after betrayal, love could not return by pretending nothing had happened. It had to return differently, slowly, truthfully, with permission. And as I closed my eyes in the bedroom that was finally mine again, I understood that healing had begun. But there was still one conversation left. Because before I could decide what the rest of my marriage would become, I needed Walter to answer the question that had been underneath everything from the beginning. If Cynthia had never crossed the line with my signature, would he ever have told me the truth on his own? I asked Walter the question on a Sunday morning. There was no argument leading up to it. No lawyer, no bank statement, no Cynthia. Just the two of us sitting on the back porch with coffee while November sunlight filtered through the nearly bare trees. Walter had been back in our bedroom for 6 nights. We were sleeping beside each other again, but healing had made us quieter, more careful. Perhaps that was not a bad thing. For 41 years we had assumed we knew what the other person meant. Now we asked. That morning I watched Walter refill my coffee. Then I said, "There's something I still need to know." He set down the pot. "All right. If Cynthia hadn't copied my signature, would you ever have told me?" Walter became completely still. I continued. "If the title company hadn't called me, if I hadn't opened the envelope, if everything had gone according to your plan, when were you going to tell me?" He looked toward the yard. "Walter, I don't know. It hurt. But I appreciated the honesty. That isn't good enough. I know." He rubbed his hands together. "I've asked myself that question in counseling." And he took a long breath. "I kept telling myself I would tell you when I had everything arranged. That's what you've said before." "Yes. But I understand now what I actually meant." I waited. Walter looked at me. "I meant I would tell you when it was too difficult for you to stop." There it was, the final truth. He didn't say it proudly. His voice shook. "I thought if the paperwork was prepared, if Cynthia's situation was stabilized, if I could show you that nobody had lost anything, you would be angry, but eventually accept it." I stared at him. "So you plan to remove my ability to say no?" "Yes." The word was almost a whisper. I looked down at my coffee. Strangely, I didn't feel the explosion of anger I expected. Maybe because I had known the answer already. I had simply needed Walter to know it too. "You weren't protecting me from stress," I said. "No, You were protecting your plan from my disagreement. Yes. And if Cynthia hadn't crossed that final line, you might have kept going. Walter's eyes filled. I think I would have. That answer could have ended our marriage. Perhaps there was a time when it would have. But something had changed. Not the facts. The facts remained ugly. What changed was Walter's willingness to stop decorating them. For months he had called control protection, secrecy compassion, financial betrayal temporary help. Now he called it what it was. I'm ashamed, he said. You should be. He nodded. I am. I reached across the table and took his hand. Walter looked surprised. Don't misunderstand this, I said. I won't. I'm not telling you what happened was acceptable. I know. I'm telling you I believe you finally understand why it wasn't. His fingers closed gently around mine. I do. That was the beginning of our real reconciliation. Not the night he returned to our bedroom. Not the day Cynthia moved out. Not when the title transaction was stopped. That morning. Because forgiveness without truth would have been another kind of pretending. 3 months later, Walter and I began marriage counseling together. The first session was uncomfortable. Our counselor, Dr. Elaine Parker, asked Walter why he had believed protecting Cynthia required excluding me. Walter talked about his father leaving, about becoming responsible for Cynthia at 17, about the promise he made to an 11-year-old girl who was terrified everyone she loved would eventually disappear. Then Dr. Parker asked him something simple. How old is Cynthia now? Walter almost smiled. 59. And how old is the girl you were trying to rescue? He went quiet. 11. That question changed something in him. Walter had spent nearly 5 decades responding to adult Cynthia as though she were still standing at the window waiting for their father. He wasn't only helping his sister, he was trying to rewrite his childhood, and he had nearly sacrificed our marriage to do it. Understanding that did not excuse him, but it gave us somewhere to begin. Cynthia and I rebuilt differently, slowly. At first we spoke only by phone. Then one afternoon she asked if I would meet her for coffee. I agreed. She arrived before me. When I walked in, she stood. For a second, neither of us knew whether to hug. We didn't. We sat. She looked healthier, less frightened. How's the apartment small? I smiled. Still hate the mattress. Cynthia stared at me. Then she laughed. I laughed too. It was the first time we had laughed together since she moved into our house. I deserved that, she said. Yes, you did. Her bankruptcy attorney had helped negotiate several obligations connected to Frank's business. The divorce was moving forward. It was painful and messy, but Cynthia was handling it herself. I keep wanting to call Walter, she admitted. Do you? Sometimes. And I wait 24 hours. I raised an eyebrow. That's your system, my counselor suggested it. You have a counselor too. Apparently this family is keeping half the therapists in Virginia employed. I laughed again. Then her expression became serious. I haven't copied anyone's signature lately. I looked at her. That joke may need another year. Fair. She reached into her purse. I brought you something. She placed a small brass key on the table. I recognized it immediately. The old key to our house. Walter had given Cynthia 1 year ago for emergencies. I should have returned this when I moved out. I picked it up. Thank you. I don't want access to anything you haven't invited me into. That sentence meant more than the key. I closed my fingers around it. Maybe someday you won't need an invitation. Her eyes filled. Maybe. 6 months after I found the envelope, our finances looked different. The boat money had gone back into retirement. Walter continued making larger monthly contributions. We would not replace all $73,860 overnight. But the balance was moving in the right direction. More importantly, I knew where every dollar was. Walter and I began reviewing our finances together on the first Saturday of each month. At first, it felt almost embarrassingly formal. Two married people sitting at a kitchen table with statements and notebooks. Then I realized something. Transparency was not unromantic. There was intimacy in being able to say, here is everything, ask me anything. Henry also helped update our estate documents. This time I read every page. Walter did too. We discussed each decision. Nothing was signed because one person said, "Trust me." We signed because both of us understood. The cream-colored envelope stayed with me. I considered throwing it away. Instead, I put it in the cedar box beside my father's letter, not as a shrine to betrayal, as a reminder. One piece of paper represented secrecy, the other represented protection. Between those two documents was the woman I had become. Nearly a year after Cynthia first arrived at our door, Walter and I hosted Thanksgiving again. Natalie came with her husband and children. Cynthia came too. She brought sweet potatoes. I watched her hesitate outside the kitchen. "Can I put these in the oven?" The question made me smile. You don't have to ask permission to use the oven. I'm learning boundaries. So am I. Walter carved the turkey. Natalie poured wine. The grandchildren argued over dinner rolls. It wasn't a perfect family gathering. There is no such thing. But it was honest. After dinner, Cynthia helped me carry dishes into the kitchen. She stopped beside me. "Thank you for letting me come. Your family." She looked at me carefully. Once those words had been used as a weapon. She's family. As though family erased boundaries. Now I understood them differently. "Your family," I repeated. "That means I love you. It doesn't mean you get to take whatever you need from me." Cynthia smiled. "I finally know the difference." Later that evening, after everyone left, Walter and I went upstairs. He stopped beside my desk. The lock had been repaired months earlier. "I still hate that drawer," he said. "Why? Because I think about what was inside it." I looked at him. "I don't." He seemed surprised. "What do you think about the fact that I opened it?" Walter smiled. "So you're still glad?" "Yes." I walked toward our bedroom. He followed. The room looked exactly the way I wanted it. My books, my photographs, my mother's cedar box, our wedding picture. Nothing about the room itself was extraordinary, but that was the lesson. A home becomes sacred not because of walls or furniture. It becomes sacred because the people inside it respect one another's place. Walter had forgotten that. Cynthia had crossed it. And I had nearly forgotten that I was allowed to defend it. Before turning off the light, Walter looked at me. "Rosalie." "Yes, if I ever tell you something is just temporary, again you have permission to throw me out of the room." I smiled. "I don't need your permission." He laughed. "That's my wife." I switched off the lamp. For the first time in months, those words felt right. Not because I belonged to Walter. Because I had learned that loving someone should never require surrendering ownership of myself. And Walter had finally learned it too.